Good morning, all of you. So, we'll start with what? Environment and ecology. We have completed science and tech. Is it okay? So, my notes, it will be sufficient. Okay, my notes, it will be sufficient. Apart from that, I have provided you the 100 questions. All those 100 questions, they are based on what? High yielding topics. That means what? There's a high possibility that approximately uh, you will be getting 5 to 6 questions out of there. Okay, so practice, read those notes, and apart from that, practice those questions and try to understand why we have created the mistakes, because the nature of the questions are what? The nature of the questions always it will be what? Analytical in nature. It will be what? Overlapping with the different current based concepts are there. Okay, so we'll start with what? Environment and ecology. Now, how much questions are being asked from this particular section specifically? 15 to 16 questions. Okay, 15 to 16 questions have been asked from the environment and ecology section. If you talk about the science and tech, it's around 10 to 11. Okay, but here how much questions we are getting? 15 to 16 questions, and apart from that, at least two questions, one or two questions, it will be like overlapping in nature. It's very difficult to specify whether it belongs to okay. It is very difficult to specify whether they belongs to a science and tech or environment. Now, what should be the approach of environment and ecology? Maximum approximately 80% of the question, 80 to 85% of the question, they have been asked from the current affairs section itself. Is it okay? So now what will be our own approach? I will be covering static topic as we have covered in science and tech. Like in here, there will be a little bit difference. For example, in science and tech, we have covered each and every static topic, because without going for the static, you cannot build the concept. And if your concepts are not okay, you'll fail to solve the analytical based question. But this is not in this particular case. In environment and ecology, we have to stress on current affair portions. Okay, if there is certain chunk of current affair, if there's a particular current affair, we have to correlate from that current affair the static portion itself. Are you getting my point? If you are going through the static books, like in the markets, there are a lot of books available. Okay, lots of books. If you are going through it and if you are reading the current affairs, it's better to read only the current affairs if your concepts are okay. But in science and tech, the approach is totally different, because without knowing the genetic engineering, how could you go for the BIRSA 101? If you're not aware of CRISPR-Cas9 technology, if you're not aware of hematopoietic stem cells, it's very difficult to solve those questions. But this is not in this particular case. So our approach, it will be like static, each and every static that will be covered, that is important for your paper. That is important for your paper. That is important for development of your foundation concepts. And apart from that, I will be focusing, I will be emphasizing on the important current affairs. Yes, if there is certain current affair, like we have recent forest conservation rules 2025, it's very important. Forest conservation rules 2026, it is also very much important. Now NGOs can participate for the development, for the restoration of degraded lands. Okay, these are the different rules, so these are very much important. Obviously one sort of question it will be asked from there. So when we'll be discussing that, we will be discussing the different sort of forest act. My approach, it will be like that. So that what happens, because when you look at the questions, obviously suppose there are 3 to 4 statements. Three statements, it will be talking of current affair, but definitely one statement, it will be correlated to a static portion. And this is the loophole where a student makes the mistake. If you go through the current affair, you can solve those 3 statements, but when it comes to the static, you will fail to do it. Okay, so don't worry. My notes, it will be sufficient this time also. Okay, no need to means read those bulky books and all. ठीक है ना? Believe me. ठीक है. But please do not share these notes in the market. It takes a lot of time for the development. I do not hire the content developer. क्योंकि वो क्या content development करते हैं मुझे ही समझ नहीं आता. Please just do let me know. Have you completed your environment basic things? Nafisa, huh? Hafiza, huh? Kunjum, huh? When I was working in the power plant, I used to say them, I used to ask them as the work is being completed, sir, kunjum kunjum kawala, something like that, kuch reh gaya hai. Okay. So we'll start with this. Just my PPTs, it will be sufficient. You have to go my PPTs, and apart from that, I have PDFs. For example, this is the concept. This today I will be discussing also the fundamental concept. These terms are very much important. It can be incorporated in a statement, and definitely one question it will be asked from there. Okay, and simultaneously prepare the notes. Okay, important prelim, 2026 prelims important. Okay, so that what after the session is over, you'll get. Okay. So with this, now when you talk about environmental science, is an interdisciplinary field that study environment and human interaction. Because when you talk about the ecosystem, you must be knowing about the ecosystem. For example, this is also an ecosystem. This particular room, it is also an ecosystem. In this ecosystem, what we are interacting with each other. We are what interacting with each other. Is it okay? We are interacting with each other with the help of this abiotic component. What is the abiotic component? But here in this particular ecosystem, what is the abiotic component? It's air. Without it, interaction is not possible. So in a simplified language, when you talk about the ecosystem, ecosystem is the functional unit of what? Environment. It is the functional unit of environment. For example, a pond. Pond is a what? Ecosystem. It's an ecosystem. But when you talk about the ecosystem, what we have to consider? Interaction. Interaction is very much important. We have to consider the interaction. We have to consider the interaction between biotic and abiotic component. For example, in the pond, if we simply say pond in case of environment, there we have to consider that this is a particular environment in which what? Fish and different sort of aquatic organisms live with the help of abiotic component. This overview. This is what? Overview. But when you talk about the ecosystem, this pond now it is acting as an ecosystem also. But here we have to consider the interaction between biotic and abiotic component. We have to say the fish, it lives in the photic zone. Is it okay? It utilizes what? Dissolved oxygen for the purpose of carrying out what? Cellular respiration. That means what? Here in this particular case, we see the functional role of abiotic component, the interaction between biotic and abiotic components. Is it okay? So when we talk about the environmental science, it's an interdisciplinary field that study the environment and the human interaction with it, encompassing natural system, resources management, solution for the environment, challenges like climate change and the pollution. Now, history towards the development of environment. Scholars believe that the early interest in the environment begins around 6000 BC, when ancient civilization in Israel and Jordan, they were being disturbed due to what? Deforestation. Okay, and after that, as a result, in 2700 BC, the first legislation limiting deforestation was established in Mesopotamia. These terms, sometimes it becomes very much important. When you talk about the environmental laws, 1986, okay, these environmental, if the questions comes like that, just after the independence or just after knowing the significance of biotic-abiotic interactions, okay, for example, this thing is being mentioned in the system nature law. We have start enacting the environmental laws. That was the first environmental laws. That's a statement, it will be what? Incorrect. Why so? Because we have seen that the first legislation limiting deforestation that was established in Mesopotamia. It was not an environmental legislation. Basically what? It was a rules that says that yes, deforestation, it should be what? Curtailed. Pliny the Elder somewhat addressed the environmental concern of an ancient civilization in his Naturalis Historica, written between 77 to 79 AC, which provided the overview of the many related subjects of discipline. And finally, when you talk about the current environment section, the concept of binomial nomenclature is introduced by Carolus Linnaeus. His text, System Nature Law, represents one of the earliest culminations of the knowledge on the subject, providing a means of identifying different species based partially on how they interact with their environment. So present, when you talk about the modern environment, what? It's presented in this particular book itself. It talks about the interactions of different species. Okay. So just why we have discussed this historical perspective, because now you can see when you go through the question, such type of statement, it is being inculcated. So at least you should be aware of it. Okay. Now we have discussed about the environment. Environment is a natural component in which biotic and abiotic components interact among themselves with each other. Biotic and abiotic component. Okay, so here what? But basically just overview. For example, we have discussed pond. This is what? Pond. It's in what? Environment. It's in what? Environment. So obviously here what? Interaction of biotic. Interaction of biotic of and a biotic, it will take place. So this is what? Phone. This interaction shape the habitat and ecosystem of an organism, ecological community. But remember, okay, the environment constitutes the physical, nutrient, water and air, climate and the biological factors along with the chemical interactions, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle that affect the organisms of a group of an organism. So when you talk about the environment, just consider environment and ecosystem. You can consider it when you talk about the environment. It's in a stage. It's in a stage where there is no play. But when you talk about the ecosystem is what? It's a play on the stage. It's a play on the stage. Similarly, when we talk about the environment, we say this is an environment. That means what? This is particular environment. Here, what will happen? The interaction of biotic and abiotic component will take place, and because of that, organisms can live over there. Organisms can live over there. In there are certain environmental portions where we do not have the organisms. For example, you go to the Arctic zone itself. Okay, it is not necessary that in the environment we should have the organisms. But when you talk about the ecosystem is what? It is the active component of environment. Active component of environment, because there we consider the functional. It's a functional element. It's a what? Functional unit of the environment. And there we consider abiotic and interaction between biotic and abiotic. That means what? Active role. Okay? Now, what is habitat? It is the physical environment in which organisms live. Address of an organism, many habitat together make up the. For example, when you talk about the fish, the habitat of fish, it will be like water, pond, lake. This is what? Habitat. When you talk about the habitat, it's a what? Component of environment. A single habitat may be common for multiple organisms which have the similar requirement. For example, a single aquatic habitat may support fish, frog, crab, phytoplanktons and many others. But see, there is a term called habitat, and apart from that, there is a term called ecological niche. Okay, this is what? Habitat. So it gives the address of an organism. But when you talk about the ecological niche, what is ecological niche? For example, we have discussed that when you talk about the habitat pond, it's this particular habitat, it is for same for phytoplanktons, it is similar for zooplanktons, it is similar for fishes, it is similar for crabs, it is similar for frogs itself. But when you talk about the ecological niche, for a species, the ecological niche, it will be what? Totally different from the others. It will be totally different. For example, whenever we are talking about the ecological niche, this ecological niche, it will particularly give you the address where it lives, the food it takes, how it behaves with the abiotic components. If the two ecological organisms, if suppose ecological niches are same for two species, what will happen? Competition will take place, and because of that, one particular species, it will get extinct. Okay, but this is not in the case of habitat. Clear? When you talk about the habitat means what? Address of an organism. So obviously what? That particular organism, it will be living in that particular habitat, and because of that, when you talk about the habitat, it will have life in it. है ना? पानी के अंदर क्या होगा? Fish. The fish have what? Life. So habitat always have life in it, whereas the environment does not necessarily have life in it. All habitat are environment, but all environments are not habitat, because it is not necessary that particular environment it will be having what? Life. A habitat is always preference of one particular species. An environment could be the preference of many species that could eventually become many habitats. Usually environment governs the properties of habitat, but not vice versa. Suppose this is a particular environment. So here you can see that this is what? Suppose consider here we have grasslands. Here we have grassland, here we have ponds. Okay. Here we have forests. So this is complete an environment. This is your habitat. This is what? Your habitat. I will be a little bit fast in nature because I will be emphasizing on the current affair part. When we are dealing with the current affair, that will go. Okay. So, for example, the different habitats and the types of habitat and examples: terrestrial habitats, forest, desert, grassland, tundra; aquatic, rivers, lake, coral reefs, oceans; microhabitats, under a rock, leaf litters; extreme habit, hot spring, polar ice cap, deep sea vents, subterranean and arboreal caves, tree canopies, artificial. Now, ecosystem, as we have discussed, ecosystem is what? It's the functional unit of nature. The functional unit of nature is the functional unit of ecosystem. Ecosystem. Okay, for example, functional unit of ecosystem. Basically, it details the interaction of biotic and abiotic component. It what? Interaction between biotic and abiotic component. For example, when you talk about the ecosystem in the ecosystem, when it is a function of nature where community of living organisms interacting with each other and the physical environment, including non-living components. Okay, for example, fish. It what takes dissolve oxygen. Is it okay? So it will be studied under what? Ecosystem. It's a what? Integral component of ecosystem. For example, when the pond is being considered as an environment, there we will consider the pond itself. We have fishes, and apart from that, we have dissolved oxygen. But when we say the same pond as an ecosystem, that means what? It's the functional unit. Function means what? It's the active unit of ecosystem. Active unit means what? Suppose this is an active class. When the classes, it will be active in nature. When taking the classes, otherwise it will be inactive in nature. Is it okay? So similarly, when you talk about the ecosystem, it's the active component of environment itself. So active components of what? We have to study all sort of interactions. For example, when you talk about fish, it breathes. How it takes dissolved oxygen. Apart from that, suppose when you talk about the nutrient recycling process, that will be also integral component of your ecosystem. Nutrient recycling. For example, just consider an agricultural field. That particular agricultural field, it is acting as an ecosystem. So when you talk about the ecosystem, obviously what? There will be interaction between the biotic and abiotic component. For example, the biotic, and because of the biotic and abiotic component, what we will have? Photosynthesis. So for the purpose of photosynthesis, what is being required? Sunlight. So it is being taken by the chlorophyll. Apart from that, xylem vascular tissue, it is responsible for taking water and minerals. Is it okay? For example, if we have leguminous plants are there, leguminous plants. So in those leguminous plants, what bacteria we have? Nitrogen fixation bacteria are there. For example, rhizobium bacteria are there. So those rhizobium bacteria, they are responsible for what? Responsible for nitrification. Nitrification is what? They will convert the atmospheric nitrogen into your ammonia, NH3. So this particular now those NH3, it will go for ammonia, it will form ammonia. Finally, it will get converted into nitrate, and that will be taken by the plant. So when you talk about the ecosystem, when we're talking about this plant, okay, this agricultural field, there is a plant. So here, when you talk about the ecosystem, we have to consider this functional role. We have to consider this interaction. Even when you talk about the nutrient recycling process, this is what nutrient recycling process. The atmospheric nitrogen, by the process of nitrification, it will be what? Converted into ammonia. Again, what? NH4. Again, it will get converted to nitrite and nitrate, and by the process of denitrification, again to release into the environment itself. So this particular process of nutrient recycling, it is being considered as a what? In the ecosystem itself. When you talk about the phosphorus, they are not being directly taken by the plant, rather they are being absorbed in the form of phosphate. Sulfur, they are being absorbed in the form of sulfate. Is it okay? So all these things, we have to consider in detail when you talk about the ecosystem. Environment with the detail हम लोग study नहीं करते, because environment is what? It's a passive thing. But when you talk about the ecosystem, it's in what? Active. Active means what? Active कब होगा? When the biotic component, it is going to interact with the abiotic component. So this is what? Active component of environment. Okay, तो जितने भी type of interactions है, that will be studied under your ecosystem. Okay. A forest ecosystem includes trees, animal, insects, soil, and sunlight. A coral reef ecosystem includes coral, fish, algae, and seawater. A desert ecosystem includes cacti, scorpions, sand, and sunlight. Okay. Types of ecosystem. You are all aware for natural ecosystem, artificial. Natural means what? Terrestrial, forest, garden, desert, aquatic, marine, freshwater. These are the components of ecosystem: biotic components and abiotic components. So biotic components is what? Primary producers, autotrophs. For example, green plant, cyanobacteria, algae. Chemotrophs, consumers, herbivorous, carnivorous, omnivorous, and detritivores also. And apart from that, we have decomposers also. When we talk about the abiotic component, light, sunlight, water, temperature, and the climate, these are what? Abiotic component. Now, abiotic component and the limiting factor. What is limiting factor? Limiting factor? No, AFISA. What is limiting factor? What is limiting factor? For example, when you talk about like intensity of light, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, they are what? All your limiting factors. Beyond this limit, things won't work, and above the limit also things won't work. We have to work within the limiting range itself. Okay. So here you can see a lot of abiotic components determine the survival of an organism, but one single factor can limit the range of an organism. This single factor is called what? Limiting factor. For example, if you have everything, but you do not have that particular factor, and because of it, the sustainability of the organism, because of which the sustainability of the plant fails, then it is called your limiting factor. For example, seeds do not germinate quickly in the evergreen rainforest despite good rains and luxuriant vegetation. This is because the surface of the soil is heavily leached, nutrients washed away by the running water. सही है ना? If we talk about the evergreen forest, क्या होगा? Evergreen forest कहाँ पे होगा? In the equatorial region, because since in the equatorial region, what we will have? Heavy rainfall, and because of that, what will happen? That particular zone, it will be always flooded, and because of the percolation of water, what will happen? That different sort of nutrients, they will be what? Leached away. So obviously that particular soil, it is what? Deficient in the nutrients. तो यहाँ पे क्या होगा? Because of this nutrient, it is acting as a what? Limiting factor. बताइए क्या चीज? Limiting factor. Limit का मतलब क्या होता है? What is limit? Limiting means what? Acts if, suppose, consider, for example, do you think nitrogen, can anybody explain how this nitrogen, it is acting as a limiting factor? Nitrogen, carbon dioxide. How much carbon dioxide is being required by the plant? For example, just consider, for example, photosynthesis. Is it okay? So photosynthesis कैसे होता है? How the photosynthesis will take place? Is it? Chali, try to understand. For example, first is your, we'll take the example of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is very much essential for the purpose of photosynthesis. Is it okay? Have I discussed the process of light reaction and dark reaction in these classes? Photosynthesis. Have I discussed? Light reaction, dark reaction. Okay, then go through my NCERT lectures or NCERT notes, you will get it. Taken. For example, just consider it. For just leaves, in the leaves, what you have stomata, that stomata, it is responsible for capturing of carbon dioxide. Clear? If the carbon dioxide is captured, what will happen? Carbon dioxide light along with the water and minerals. It forms what? A starch, C6H12O6. Taken carbon dioxide. Now, suppose we need around 350 to 450 ppm parts per million. Okay, amount of carbon dioxide. If this is being required, what will happen? Plant can carry out the process of photosynthesis. But just consider, if the amount of carbon dioxide, if it increases, what will happen? What will happen? Global warming. Okay, because of that, temperature क्या होगा? Temperature, it will what? Rise. When temperature will increase, what will happen? Do you think the particular crop that remain in that particular range of temperature, it can survive? For example, if you go to the desert region, there what we have? There we have cactus plant. Cactus, when you talk about the cactus plant, when you can leaves को अगर देखेंगे, when you talk about the cactus leaf, they have a special design. Why so? Because they can restrict the process of evapotranspirations. है ना? So that means what? With this carbon dioxide, it is also what? Limited. Limited means what? The range required is what? 330 to 450, something like that. But if it exceeds like this into the atmospheric region, what will happen? It is going to restrict the process of photosynthesis itself. The particular type of plant, for example, luxurious plant, evergreen forest. When you talk about the evergreen forest, what is the temperature over there? Evergreen forest में चले जाएंगे, what is the temperature? 22 to 28 degrees Celsius. But if the temperature goes beyond 45 degrees Celsius, do you think that particular evergreen forest, it can thrive? No. If you talk about the tundra region, they have a particular type. This is called the limiting range. Okay. समझ में आ गया? So this inferior surface soil is the limiting factor that limits the germination of seeds. Likewise, germinated sapling may not survive due to the lack of light because of the dense canopy. The absence of light is the limiting factor. है ना? Factor affecting what? Photosynthesis. Intensity of light. The rate of photosynthesis will increase, but the intensity of light will increase. But after certain, what will happen? It will become constant. When you talk about the rate of carbon dioxide concentration, if the carbon dioxide concentration will increase, what will happen? Obviously, the rate of photosynthesis, it is going to enhance, but after certain limit, it will become constant. Okay. Like abiotic factor, we'll discuss light quality. We have discussed in science that when you talk about the wavelength of light, it's in between what? 400 to 750 nanometers. Okay. So different pigments absorb different wavelengths. For example, maximum absorption occur in the blue and red regions. Okay. Green light is the most reflected or transmitted, resulting in the lowest rate of photosynthesis. See, whenever we talk about the light, okay, it's a what important topic for you prelims itself. UPSC can include this particular statement anywhere. Okay. So always remember, when you talk about the green light, it is mostly reflected and transmitted. So for example, if the questions come like the green light is the most dominant component of the light wavelength that is being used for the purpose of photosynthesis, that statement is what? Wrong. Light intensity, rate of photosynthesis increases linearly with the light intensity at lower level. Just check my PPTs in your tab. Whether this thing is okay. Here you can see that the lines are overlapping in nature. In your, it's there. Just a moment. Yes. If the light intensity is very low, then also what will happen? We do not have the proper rate of photosynthesis. ठीक है ना? If it is very low intensity of the light. At very high intensity, the rate of level saturation point or decreases due to damage. Okay. Light duration affect the total amount of biomass produced in a day, but not the instantaneous rate. Crucial for photoperiodism, flowering growth cycle rather than the chemical reactions. This is your photosynthetically active radiations. Only 2 to 10% of the total solar energy is captured by the plant. Okay, and how much? 2 to 10%. Go through it. Effects of frost on plant explained. These are what? Abiotic components. These are what? Abiotic component interactions. Okay. For example, cellular dehydration. Ice forms intracellular space drawing water. We have discussed the process of plasmolysis. In the plasmolysis, okay, for example, when you take a particular brinjal, if it is placed into salty water, what will happen? It will try to dilute it, and because of that, the cell, it is going to release what? Water from its cytoplasm region. The similar thing will happen. Suppose what happens? Suppose if there is certain leaves are there, over the leaves, if it is completely covered with the ice sheet, what will happen? Ice sheet. Ice is what? Water, complete water, and because it's a purest form of water, there you can say that. Now what will happen? Those leaves, they will start releasing the cellular liquid. They will start releasing liquid from the cytoplasmic part, and because of that, what will happen? Plasmolysis will take place, and eventually it will die. Okay. Mechanical damage. Water expands when it freezes. 9% volume increase, rupturing all cell walls, leading to frost crack in the bark and wilting of the soft tissues. You must be knowing when you talk about ice. Ice की बात करेंगे. So what? Suppose अगर if you have a particular plastic bottle, is it okay? Now if you want to keep it in the freezer, do you think it should be completely filled? It should not be completely filled. There should be certain left. There should be certain spaces left. Why so? Because ice is less denser than water. Ice floats on the water. Ice floats on the water. Okay, and because of that, what will happen? What will happen when water gets converted into ice? The volumetric expansion will take place. It will expand by 9%. Okay, and because of that, there is a strong possibility that the cells can burst. Okay, metabolic disruptions. Low temperature slow down enzymatic activities and photosynthesis process. Stunted growth and delay phenology, flowering and fruiting. Okay. If we talk about the temperature, we have discussed that an optimum temperature is being looked at for the purpose of photosynthesis. That, and because if a particular plant it is being completely covered with the first temperature, it will what? It will be low in nature, and because of that, the rate of photosynthesis will get affected. Vascular blockage. Xylem vessels can get blocked by the air bubbles. Embolism during the freeze-thaw cycles. There is a strong possibility that when you talk about the xylem vascular tissues, we have discussed, I think I have discussed, when you talk about xylem vascular tissue, it is responsible for taking water and minerals. It takes by the process of what? Capillarity action. It takes by the process of capillarity action. And this particular capillarity action, it will get blocked because of the air bubbles. Normal capillarity action में देखिएगा, suppose if from the tanker, suppose if you have collected, if you have what connected a bucket from the tanker itself, and from the tanker water is what coming in the bucket by the capillary action. If there is certain air bubbles that are being developed, it will what stop the capillary actions. ठीक है ना? Now, if there is a continuous freeze-thaw cycle, that means what? Ice molecules, it will get freezed and again it will get converted into water. There's strong possibility that the bubbles can develop over there. What? Bubbles. And because of these bubbles, what? Capillary action won't work. And if this capillary action is not working, what will happen? The water and minerals, it won't get transported to the cell. And because of that, what will happen? The complete photosynthesis, it will get affected. Okay. Now, dieback. Dieback refers to the progressive dying, usually backwards, from the tip of any portion of the plant. This is one of the adaptive mechanisms to avoid adverse conditions like drought. In this mechanism, the root remains alive for years, but the shoots die. Example, red cedar, silk, cotton tree. Okay, for example, suppose there is a particular plant. Okay, you have planted that. The sapling developed now because of high temperature. Because of high temperature or because of very low temperature, there is a strong possibility that the shoots that is being developed, the sapling that is being developed, it will die. But the seed is alive in nature. But what? Seed is alive in nature. Okay, it is waiting for the conditions to get optimized. So this is called your dieback. Now temperature. High temperature results in the death of plant due to coagulation of protoplasmic proteins. Some bacteria can survive high temperature because of the protoplasmic protein do not coagulate at high temperatures. When you talk about the protoplasm, there we have a lot of protein that is essential for the cellular mechanisms in particular plants. But if there is a high temperature, what will happen? That due to coagulation of protoplasmic proteins, high temperature disturb the balance between the respiration and photosynthesis process. It also results in the desiccation of plant tissues and depletion of moisture. That means what, when with the high temperature, for example, if you are living in a particular high temperature, what will carry out the process of sweating. Similarly, when you talk about the plants, they carry out the process of what? Evapotranspirations. Just try to remember these rules. Okay, for example, Bergman's rule, individuals in colder climates tend to be larger in size. Polar bears are much larger than the bears to conserve body heat. If you go to the polar region itself, okay, there you will see that the animals surviving over the polar region, they will have what? Larger body, so that what? They can conserve the heat. Okay. Allen's rule, animals in the colder climate had shorter ears and limbs. Arctic foxes have tiny ears compared to the large ears of the desert fence foxes. Glogger's rule, birds and mammals in warm, humid regions are mostly heavily pigmented. Darker insects in the tropical regions are often darker than those of the arid region. Okay? Just remember these rules. We'll discuss ecosystem specific effects of nitrogen limitations. There we are going to discuss this when we're studying about your nitrogen fixation process, nitrogen nutrient recycling process. Are you aware of photosynthesis process? Light reaction, dark reaction. What is dark reaction? Light reaction. Okay, here what we have? Chlorophyll. This is a green pigment called chlorophyll. Here we have an element called magnesium, and this chlorophyll, it is responsible for what? Trapping of sunlight. Okay, and apart from that we have stomata. It what? Absorbs carbon dioxide. Absorbs carbon dioxide. Is it okay? And here we have what? This xylem vascular tissue. It is responsible for taking off water and minerals. Water and minerals. Okay, for example, if we talk about like nitrogen, plant they cannot directly take nitrogen. Even we cannot take the direct nitrogen. Why so? Because when you talk about the nitrogen element, nitrogen that is present inside the atmosphere, it comprises of 3 covalent bonds. When you talk about the nitrogen, N2 means what? Is it? So this is what? 3 covalent bonds are taken. These are the 3 covalent bonds. Now, higher amount of energy it is being required to break those covalent bonds. Because of that, this elemental form of the nitrogen, we cannot utilize it because we do not produce sufficient energy so that what we can break these covalent bonds. And because of this only, the plant also since they're having what? 3 covalent bonds, they directly cannot absorb it, because when you talk about the plant itself, they do not have the potential to break these 3 nitrogen bonds. So obviously plant absorb this in the form of your nitrite, in the form of your nitrate, mostly in the form of nitrate, mostly over here, even phosphate. Okay, so this is being taken to the plant in this particular process of what? Xylem vascular tissue, which is responsible for that. Now what will happen in this particular leaves? When you talk about photosynthesis, it takes place in what? Plastids. Which plastids? What are the different type of plastids we have? Plastids chloroplast, chromoplast, and leucoplast. Is it okay? So when you talk about photosynthesis, it takes place in what? Chloroplast. Okay, so it will photosynthesis. It will be taking place in chloroplast. Okay. So what is the reaction? Carbon dioxide, and when it reacts with the water in the presence of sunlight, what will happen? Starch is being produced, along with what? Oxygen plus water is being released. Okay. Now when you talk about the photosynthesis reaction, it is being divided into what? Two: light reaction and dark reaction. Light reaction and dark reaction. Okay. Light reaction means what? When you talk about this particular question, it is being asked into the environment section 2014 itself. When you talk about the light reaction means what? This is light reaction. Light reaction. Light reaction में क्या होता है? For example, we are getting oxygen into the atmosphere for the purpose of breathing. We are getting it because of the light reaction itself. When you talk about the light reaction में क्या होता है? Photolysis of water will take place. Photolysis of water. Photolysis of water means what? H2O, it will break down in the presence of sunlight. It will become 2 hydrogen ion plus oxygen, and this particular oxygen gas is being released. So this is called the light reaction. We are getting oxygen because of your light reaction. It is taking place in grana part of the chloroplast. Grana. Yeah, grana. Okay. The other is what? Dark reaction. Other is what? Dark reaction. This is called a dark reaction. Okay. In dark reaction, what? When you talk about the light reactions, it takes place in the presence of sunlight. It takes place in the presence of sunlight because this sunlight is very much essential for it. What? It can break the bonds between what? When you talk about these water molecules, what we have? Oxygen. This is what? Hydrogen, but this is what? Hydrogen, but this, when you talk about the light, it breaks these covalent bonds. Okay, and it is responsible for the release of what? Hydrogen ions plus oxygen. Clear? But when you talk about the dark reaction, it takes place in the absence of light. In the absence of light. In the absence of light. Okay? In the absence of light. So in dark reaction, what will happen is carbon dioxide, what? It will get converted into a starch, C6H12O6. Okay? So it will be called oxidized. Oxidized. Is it okay? The term is what? Carbon dioxide will get oxidized to a starch. Because here in the starch you can see that the number of oxygen molecule is what? More. Is it okay? Clear? Dark reaction. Clear? Now, why it is advisable not to sleep beneath the tree during the night time? Why it is being said that you should not have to sleep beneath the tree during the night time? They take oxygens. Okay. Why they take oxygen, then how it is going to affect you? Why it is being advised not to sleep beneath the tree during the night, or in the vicinity of the tree? Okay, see why? Because here what will happen? Suppose daytime. In the daytime, what happens in the plant? Light reaction will take place. In the daytime, light reaction will take place. Light reaction, and because of this light reaction, what we will have? Oxygen. We will have oxygen in the vicinity of the tree. But simultaneously, when you talk about the plant, they undergo the process of cellular respiration itself. Is it okay? For example, always remember, if I say that photosynthesis is the photosynthesis, it takes place exclusively in the leaves. Am I correct? 78 to 81% of the photosynthesis, it takes place in the leaves. The rest of the photosynthesis is taking place in the stem itself. Okay, but When you talk about the respiration, plant also respires. They also require energy. When you talk about the respiration process, the breakdown of a starch to release what? Energy. Remember one thing, each individual component of the plant, they respire independently. For example, leaves, they also carry out the process of respiration. For the process of respiration, what we need? Oxygen. The stomata, it is also responsible for the absorption of oxygen. When you talk about the stems, they also carry out the process of what? Respiration. Why so? Because when you talk about the stems, small pores are there, that is called cuticles. आप stem को if you go and see stems, you will look, if you observe, you will see some black spots are there in the stems. That stems are the pores called cuticles. Now when you talk about the roots also they carry out the process of respiration independently, because roots, they take oxygen from the soil porosity, Now this is oxygen is being released in the daytime also. What? Cellular respiration. In the cellular respiration, what will happen? The starch that is being formed, it reacts with oxygen to form what? Water, along with what? Carbon dioxide. It is being released plus 38 molecules of ATP. Okay, so when you talk about the cellular respiration, what is being evolved? Carbon dioxide. Is it okay, Ayan? समझ में आ रहा है ना? Okay, so in the cellular respiration, but remember one thing, the rate of light reaction is much more greater than the rate of cellular respiration, and because of that, what in the daytime, towards the vicinity of the plant, what we will have? Oxygen itself. But now night time, what will happen? Night time we do not have light reaction. Because of that, we do not have oxygen evolution. It is not there. Night time, what we have? Dark reaction. In the dark reaction, nothing but carbon dioxide. Already the carbon dioxide that is being absorbed into the daytime, it will get converted into what? Carbon dioxide. It will get converted into starch. O6. Okay, and but obviously in the night time, what will happen? Cellular respiration, it will take place. We respire. In the night time, what will happen? Cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, and the cellular respiration, what will happen? It will take oxygen. To release carbon dioxide. Okay, so when you talk about like why it is being advised not to sleep beneath during the night time, because in the night time there is no light reaction. That means what? Oxygen is not being evolved, and apart from that, there is only dark reaction. But at the same time, cellular respiration that is being taking place, and because of that, the concentration of carbon dioxide, it will be more during the night time itself. Okay. Clear? Done? Okay, we have discussed about the plastids. Okay, na? So when you talk about plastids are of three types. What are those? Chloroplast, chromoplast, and leucoplast. Okay. Now we have discussed the chloroplast. When you talk about the chloroplast, it is responsible for the purpose of photosynthesis. Obviously, if it is responsible for the purpose of photosynthesis, in the chloroplast itself we have two most important components, grana and stroma. Grana we have light reaction, and the stroma what we have dark reaction. So when you talk about the chloroplast, it is basically responsible for the synthesis of starch. Now we have chromoplast. What is chromoplast? Ayan, chromoplast क्या है? तो कलर देते हैं तो क्या होगा? होली तो नहीं खेलेंगे? चलिए, नहीं आता कोई सुनिए, जो पढ़ा रहे हैं समझ में आ रहा है ना, कहीं भी हो प्लीज डू लेट मी नो. ओके ना, बिकॉज एनवायरमेंट में ज्यादा क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, and I will be emphasizing on that particular concept only, that is very tricky in nature. ठीक है. जो क्रोमोप्लास्ट जो होता है, इट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर इम्पार्टिंग डिफरेंट कलर्स टू द पेटल्स, द फ्लावर्स के जो पेटल्स जो होते हैं, पंखुड़ी, so different colors is because of chromoplast. This is simplified, this is very simplified nature. If I say, and when you talk about the pollinator agents, we have pollination process, for example self pollination, cross pollination. So this chromoplast, it is responsible for pollination. Because of the different colors of the plants, the pollinator agents, they are being attracted. So the different biodiversity of the plant is because of chromoplast. Can I say, is it right? The different biodiversity or the high biodiversity of the plant species is because of the chromoplast plastids. Am I right? Yes, because it is responsible for the purpose of what? Pollination. And finally, what we have? Leucoplast. So leucoplast, it's on the located on the where? Root itself, that is not exposed to sunlight. Here we have what? Leucoplast. Here what we have? Leucoplast. Okay, when you talk about the leucoplast, it's what? It is in the roots. It is not exposed to sunlight, but it do store starch. It do store starch. Now, how the starch are being stored in the leucoplast? For example, when you take radish, carrot, sweet potato, they have a starch or not? So how? Okay, see, we have discussed chloroplast. Is it okay? Chromoplast. Now, when you talk about the leucoplast, it is located on the roots. It is not exposed to sunlight. It also stores starch. It also stores what? It also stores a starch. How? For example, we have discussed the process of photosynthesis. So one is what? One of the important example is what? One of the important mechanism is what? Xylem vascular tissue. This xylem vascular tissue, it is responsible for taking water and minerals to the leaves for the purpose of carrying photosynthesis. Now the starch that is being developed over there, now this starch, it is being redistributed to each and every part of the plant by what? Phloem vascular tissue. By phloem vascular tissue. Now this phloem vascular tissue, it is responsible for what? Translocating the starch in the leucoplast itself. ठीक है? Why nitrogen is an integral component? We have discussed that we feed urea, है ना? Even the nitrogens, atmospheric nitrogen, they are being converted into what? Nitrite, nitrate, ammonium ion, so that what? It can be easily taken by the plant form. Now, what is the requirement of nitrogen? Why plant require nitrogen? Yes, because when you talk about the nitrogen, it's an essential component of amino acid. Okay, and we have discussed in the central dogma of molecular biology, if you can remember. Ultimately, it's the what? Combination of different amino acids in a proper sequence that gives what? That forms protein. When you talk about the plant hormones, we have different plant hormones. The plant hormones, they are being formed from the protein. Plant hormones are nothing but the protein. That means what? They hormones, they have this nitrogen content. Is it okay? For example, when you talk about the insectivorous plant. So, what is insectivorous plant? They eat insects. Why they eat insects? Yeah, so that what they can fulfill the requirement of nitrogen itself. Okay, they do not have the mechanism what they roots do have. They do not have the mechanism that they can take nitrite and nitrate and ammonia form. They carry out the they can carry out the process of photosynthesis, but they cannot directly absorb nitrogen. And because of that, for the fulfillment of nitrogen, they entrap insect. And because of that, they are called your semi-heterotrophs, not semi-autotrophs, semi-heterotrophs. Autotrophs are what? Autotrophs are what? Or when you talk about the autotrophs means what? They can synthesize their own food. They can synthesize, for example, green plant, they can synthesize their own food by the process of photosynthesis. Cyanobacteria, okay, they can synthesize their own, own food. But when you talk about we have to depend upon the primary producers. Plants, they are called autotrophs, they are called the primary producers. Why primary producers? On the earth, only there is one source of energy. What is that? Sun. Sun is the only source of energy on the Earth's surface. We do not have any other sources of energy. It's the external energy source. Okay. Now it's only the primary producers. It's only the autotroph that is what responsible for conversion of this particular sunlight into what? Starch. Okay, and that is why they are called the primary producers. They are called your primary producer, and we are the we what? Consumers. Ultimately, we have to depend upon the primary producers. For example, we take what? We take vegetables. So vegetables is what? They are the primary producers. Is it okay? We take animals. Is it okay? Now when you talk about the animals, they take what? Plants. So ultimately what? Everything it is dependent upon the primary producers. We are what? Consumers. So consumer, they are called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs is what? They cannot synthesize their own food. Ultimately they have to rely on the primary producers. So we have microbes. Where are the other students? Revise the concept within 5 minutes what we have discussed. Okay, so now we will be talking about the microbes. That means what? Microbes, decomposer. So first is what? See, why I am discussing this, because these terms na phagotrops, sorry, phagotrops. Okay, S. Okay, phagotrops. These terms sometimes they become important, because why so? Because they will be included into the statement, and now there are two choices for you. First of all, you have to understand the statement, and apart from that, you have to see what does it mean. So that is why phagotrops. Phagotrops is what? They go for phagocytosis process. Phagocytosis means what? Engulf. They will directly engulf it. Okay, phagocytosis process. Okay, organism that ingest solid organic particle or whole organism. That is how they are going to derive the energy out of it. Ingestion, internal digestion via food, vehicle, or stomach. Example is what? Amoeba. So this is what? Suppose amoeba, and this is what? So certain solid particles. So what amoeba it will do? It will change its shape. It will change its shape, and finally what will happen? This will be what? Engulf. Okay, and because of this, this is called your phagotrops. Primary, secondary consumers, they regulate population size of the prey. Now osmotrops. Osmotrops, the term itself says that it is being associated with the process of what? Osmosis. So organisms that absorb dissolved organic compound from the environment by the process of what? By the process called osmosis or absorption, direct transport of nutrients across the cell membranes. Many bacteria, some fungi, and certain protists, they process leaked nutrients into the aquatic and soil environment. Now saprotrops. Saprotrops means what? Saprotrops, organisms that feed on the dead and decaying organic matters. Extracellular digestion, they secrete enzymes outside the body to break down the matter and then absorb it. So they secrete enzyme, and because of the secretion of the enzyme, what will happen? The dead decaying matters, it will what? It is going to release the nutrient, and those nutrients it will be what? Absorbed by these saprophytics. Example, fungi and many soil bacteria, decomposers. They are called decomposers, crucial for nutrient recycling, turning organic back into your inorganic one. Now, when you talk about the saprophyte, they play an important role in your what? They play an important role in nutrient recycling process. They play important role in nutrient recycling process. For example, there is a dead, when you talk about the leaves that is being dead leaves, okay, fallen leaves. Now, when you talk about the fallen leaves, it contains what? Carbons are there, nitrogen is also there, because when you talk about the leaves, obviously there will be certain proteins. Now this particular bacteria, they will be responsible for what? They will release some of the chemicals, and because of the release of those chemicals, those leaves, they will be what? They will release the nutrient. Now those nutrient, they will take it, and soils, they will absorb it. Now this particular saprophyte, they are also responsible for the formation of what? Humus. Is it? Now detrivorous, organism that feed on the detrivorous dead plants and animals fecal matters. Fragmentation, when you talk about the detrivorous, for example, leaves are there. So obviously when you talk about the leaves, they are what? They have, their surface area is very less. Surface area. Samjhiye, when you talk about the detrivorous animal, for example, this is the leaf. This is the what? Leaf. So the surface area is very much higher. Now this detrivorous animal, they will start feeding on those leaves, and because of the feeding on the leaves, they will get fragmented. They will get converted into a small size. And now if a small size means what? The surface area is very much higher. The surface area is very much higher. Now on those small leaves, saprophytes, they will attack, and they will if they will attack what? They are going to release the enzymes, and on release of enzymes, they will what? Extract the nutrients out of it. So detrivorous, they increase earthworm, millipedes, wood lice, dung beetles. They increase the surface area of waste for saprotrops to act upon. Are you getting my point? समझ में आ गया सभी को ना? Suppose if there is a bigger leaves, that particular leaves, it will get fragmented because of what? Detrivorous animal. Now, if those leaves, they have been converted into small size, on those small set, what will happen? Those saprotrops, they will act, and they will extract the nutrients out of it. So saprophytes, they are very much important for the purpose of what? They play an important role for nutrient recycling process. For nutrient recycling process, recycling हो रहा है ना. For example, carbon dioxide जो है, it is being absorbed into the leaves. Nitrate, they are being absorbed into the leaf. Now this is being absorbed into the leaf. Now this again, they are being recycled into the soil. For the purpose of recycling, these two, detrivorous and saprotrop, they are very much important. So now the statement that One statement can be formulated out of it that detritivores and saprotrophs, they are very much important for the purpose of nutrient recycling. Is it correct? And that is why these terms are important. Okay, now ecology. So ecology is the scientific study of relationship of the relationship of living organism with that of with other environment. That means what, when you talk about the ecology, it's nothing but what? It's the study of ecosystem. A study of ecosystem means what? A study of the functional roles. A study of functional means what? Basically here we will study the interaction between the abiotic and the biotic component. Is it okay? So it has been derived from the two Greek words oikos, meaning the home, and logos means what? A study. When you talk about when you talk about ecology, it studies what? Ecology, it studies functional role of ecosystem. Functional role means what? Interaction. So interaction means what? Interaction of abiotic component with the biotic component. Interaction of abiotic component with what? Biotic component. So we need what? Biotic component. So here what we will, in ecology, what we will be considering? Organism, population, communities, ecosystem, biomes, and biosphere. This falls under your ecology. I think all of you are aware of it. We have discussed about the ecological niche. No two, for example, when you talk about the habitat, in that particular habitat, for example, pond, there are many species of fishes are there, crabs, frogs, different phytoplankton, zooplankton, it will be there. Okay, so in a particular habitat, different species can live together. But when you talk about the ecological niche, it will be what? It will be what? Specific and exclusive for a particular species. That means what? If ecological niche is same for the two individuals, what will happen? One of the individuals, they have to get extinct. And what is the significance of ecological niche? For example, recently what we have planned for the reintroduction of cheetah reintroduction plan. So whenever you go for the conservation of species, okay, you should be quite aware of your ecological niche. If you are not, this ecological niche is very much important for the conservation of species. Otherwise, what will happen? The species, it won't survive over there. We are bringing it from the Botswana region of Africa. So obviously, वो कहाँ जाएगा? It will get translocated to what? Madhya Pradesh. Because in the Madhya Pradesh, if you go to the Madhya Pradesh, different forests are there. But when you talk about the Madhya Pradesh, the maximum forest is what? Dry deciduous forest. So at least they are having what? More or less similar ecological niche. लेकिन exact ecological niche नहीं. And that is the reason why the cheetahs are not surviving over there. Okay? So niche is a unique functional role. A position species, habitat niche, what it lives, sorry, okay, where it lives. Food niche, what it adds or decompose and what species it competes with. Reproductive niche, how and where it reproduces. Physical, chemical niche, temperature, landscape. If you are aware of it, it is very much essential in the conservation of organism. A niche is unique for a species, while many species share the same habitat. No two species in the habitat can have the same niche. If this is happening because of the competition, what will happen? One will get one will get extinct. For example, this is a common habitat. This is what, when you talk about this tree, okay, tree, it's a what? Considered it's a habitat. But here you can see that this top branches and the leaves, this is what the ecological niche for bees, wasps, moths, squirrels, okay. Trunk, insects and larvae. When you talk about the roots and litter zone, bacteria, earthworm, wood lice and fungi. So they have what? Different ecological niche in the same habitat. Different ecological niche in the same habitat. Okay. What is ecotones? Okay. What is the significance of ecotones? Why it is so much important? What happens to the biodiversity over there? Because of age effect. Is it? So what is ecotones? Ecotones is nothing but the transition zone between the two ecosystem. Two ecosystem. Okay. For example, we have forest, we have a desert. So in between that we have a transition zone. What is that zone? Grassland. This particular grassland, it's your ecotones. Wetlands, they are your ecotones. So obviously they show what? Age effect. Age effect means what? The species biodiversity, it will be more over there. Okay. So they will have greater productivity also. ठीक है ना, यहाँ देख सकते हैं. This is one ecosystem, and this is what other ecosystem. Here what we have transition zone. This transition zone is called your ecotones. Here we have number of species. It will be very much high in comparison to the both the ecosystem, and this particular thing, the number of species high over there, and this particular effect is called your age effect. इसको क्या कहते हैं हम लोग? Age effect कहते हैं. तो ecosystem and ecotone is a transitional area between the two ecosystem, often exhibiting characteristics of both, while the age effect refers to the changes in the population or community structure that occurs at the boundary of this habitat, typically leading to increased biodiversity. So remember this term, age effect. Okay na? For example, there is certain region, and because in that certain region it is acting as a ecotones, वहाँ पे जो है we have seen the enhanced rate of your biodiversity. So the term age effect, it can be used over there. Ecotones region, transitional regions like mangroves, wetlands, estuaries, grasslands have a greater productivity than the normal ecosystem like forest, ocean, pond, riverine. This is because of the wild. This is because of the wide-ranging species from the adjacent ecosystem being present in the ecotone. ठीक है ना? Now, what is ecoline? Ecocline is a zone of gradual and continuous change from one ecosystem to the another, characterized by the lack of sharp boundary. That means what? Whenever, suppose for example, whenever we move from forest to the grass, okay, or from grassland to the desert. So grassland, it is acting as a ecosystem. It is acting as a ecotones. Is it okay? Now, do you think just forest will get completed and immediately this grassland will get started, this grassland will get completed and immediately this desert will get started? No, it's not like that. Slowly and gradually what will happen? The forest canopy cover first it will decrease and slowly it will get converted into what? Grassland. And from that what will happen? Slowly this grassland will get converted into your desert. Okay. So this is called your ecocline, is a zone of gradual and continuous change from the one ecosystem to another, characterized by a lack of sharp boundary between the two terms in the term of species composition occurring across the environmental gradient like altitude, temperature, and salinity. A wetland is a good example of ecocline, representing a gradual transition from terrestrial to an aquatic ecosystem. Biosphere. What is biosphere? It's the biological component of the earth which includes lithosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere. Okay. It consists of all living organisms together with the dead organic matter produced by them. The biosphere is absent at the extreme North Pole and South Pole, highest mountain, deepest ocean, since existing hostile conditions do not support. Okay. Now, adaptation. We have discussed adaptation. What is adaptation? What? How? What is the factor responsible for it? Basically, we have discussed in the case when we're discussing with the antimicrobial resistance. Is it okay? We have discussed that antimicrobial resistance is a what? Naturally evolutionary process in accordance with the Darwin theory of natural selections. Is it? So when a particular bacteria it moves to the other or hostile ecosystem, what will happen? There are two options: either it will survive or it will die. For the purpose of survival, it has to adapt. And when we talk about the adaptations, it go for what? Horizontal gene transfer. That means what? The process of conjugation. Process of conjugation. If there are certain plasmids that is being ejected into that particular ecosystem, it will what? Absorb those plasmids. Now, now those plasmids, since they are being integrated in the plasmid, what? There will be certain genes. That genes it will get expression in the protein, and because of that protein, that particular bacteria, it can live over there. Is it okay? So conjugations we have discussed, transduction, transformations. So this horizontal gene transfer, they are responsible for what? Making a particular bacteria adaptable to a particular ecosystem. Is it okay? So this is called the adaptation. So now, adaptation refers to the heritable changes. Either it can be behavioral, morphological, or physiological that is evolved through the natural selection, improves your organism fitness, survival, or specific. Okay, Darwin's theory of natural selections. Either you have to die or what? Survive in that particular ecosystem. So first is your examples of adaptations: morphological, physical features like sharp claws of a predator or thick fur of the cold climate. You can see polar bears. So obviously what? They have larger body so that what? They can conserve the heat. Apart from that, they have what? Furs over there. Furs क्या करेगा? Internal heat को वो क्या करके रखेगा? Preserve करके ही रखेगा. ठीक है? Physiological. Internal process like ability of some desert animal to conserve water, for example camel, है ना? Camel, and suppose in case of necessity this camel is having the tendency that it can what? It can extract the water from its fats itself. Internal combustion. So वो क्या है? Physiological है. Another is what? Behavioral approach. Actions or responses that enhance survival, such as bird building a nest, predator hunting at the specific time. So this is what your behavioral approach. So all this is in essence, these are integral component of your adaptation. But this particular adaptation we talk about, this particular adaptation is what? It is in accordance with what? Accordance with Darwin's theory of natural selection. Natural selection. But these adaptations are not in accordance with neo-Darwinism theory. Neo-Darwinism theory. Because when we talk about the neo-Darwinism theory, there we consider what? Genetic changes. Because we have discussed the cases of bacteria. Ultimately, what the bacteria to adapt in that particular ecosystem, it said it should what? Develop new genes. Mutations of gene will take place. Either gene will take place, or it's going to what? Take the genes from that particular environment by the process of conjugation. So this is in accordance with the Darwin's theory of natural selection, not in accordance with what? Neo-Darwinism. Because in Neo-Darwinism, what we consider genetic mutations. Genetic mutations are being considered. Or genetic changes. Do not get confused. Morphological, physiological, and behavioral. These terms, they are very much important. Just see, questions when you talk keywords are very much important. Agar keywords, if you know those keywords, obviously what? 40% is a strong possibility that you can solve the questions. Agar keywords nahi pata hai, then because that particular statement, it should synchronize with the keywords. For these are the certain examples of morphological adaptations. Many desert plants have thick cuticles on their leaf surfaces and have their stomata arranged in deep pits to minimize water loss through transpirations. Because if you go to the desertic, for example, desert area, there what happens? The moisture content is what? Very low. That's because of the desiccating effect. And now those plants, they have to conserve the water. So to avoid the process of what? Evapotranspirations, they have their stomata. Because when you talk about evapotranspiration, that means for release of water from the leaves. A stomata, it is through that particular portion what? Only water it moves. So when you talk about the stomata, they are arranged in deep pits to minimize water losses. And apart from that, they have thick cuticles. Just waxy-like layers it will be there. So that what? They won't allow evapotranspirations. The other is what? Mammals in the colder climates, we have generally have shorter ears or limbs to minimize heat losses. Okay. A hypothermophile is an organism that thrives in extremely hot climate. 60-degree example, Archaebacteria flourish in hot springs, deep sea, hydrothermal vents. So these are all what? Morphological. When you talk about the morphological adaptation, they are in accordance with the Darwin's theory of natural selection, not with the neo-Darwinism theory. These examples go through camels. Fats in humps releases water when broken down. Can withstand body temperature up to 40 degrees Celsius, 42 degrees Celsius. An extreme large intestine, all the water from the food they ate, and they have the capacity that can drink up to 30% of its body weight. That means what? They can take up to 200 liters of water in what? 3 minutes. These are all morphological. When you talk about the camels, camels can easily move onto the land surface, on the sand surface. But it's become very difficult for us. Why so? They are wider feet. So what basic fundamental concept is applicable over there? Pressure. Pressure is what? Force per unit area. Force per unit area. For example, injection. Okay, they are being given with the help of pressure. Force is very much less, but when you talk about the area, it is very much minimized, and because of that, the pressure is very much high in nature. Is it okay? So, and similarly, when you go, if you have to walk onto the sand, force per unit area. When you talk about the area of the food, it is very much high. It is very much wider in the case of camels, and because of that, pressure become very much low and big, and it start floating on the sand surface. Okay, but bike surface area is what? Cycle surface area is very much less, and because of that, pressure is very much high. And so when you try to move on to the sand using your bike or cycles, those tires, they get what? Submerged. They sink basically. Okay. Now physiological. Okay, na? Physiological means what? Physiological adaptations are internal, often metabolic process that help animals survive in the environment, such as venom production in snakes, or blubber in seals for insulation. Hibernation. Some animals like deer hibernate to conserve energy during the periods of food scarcity and harsh weather conditions. Hibernation. Pata hai na? Okay. It's a what? Phases of inactivity. Phases of what? Inactivity. No movement, no running, nothing like that. And because of that, energy requirement is very low. Energy requirement is very low. That means what? Less food, it is very much sufficient. Even the food that they have taken, it is sufficient from them. Okay, hibernation. Anti-freeze protein. Certain fish species in cold environment produce anti-freeze protein to prevent their cells from freezing. We have discussed that if the temperature is very much low, what will happen? The process of plasmolysis, it will take place everywhere. Because of the process of plasmolysis, what? Water from the cell, it will be taken out, and the cell, it will die. But how? There are certain fishes in the cold climate that they survive, because that particular fish, they synthesize what? Antifreeze proteins, and because of that, now they can live in that particular ecosystem. Okay. A specialized respiratory system. Whales and other marine mammals have adapted to hold their breath for longer periods, allowing them to live in the ocean. So just go through it. These are the different examples. पढ़ लीजिएगा. Questions can be asked. Environment. ठीक है. So, okay. Now, for example, we have discussed the process of hibernation. Okay. Physiological adaptation we have discussed. So hibernation is the state of inactivity. Decreased metabolism in some endotherms. ठीक है ना? Endotherms means what? There are two, endotherms and ectotherms. Endotherms means what? Warm-blooded animal. Ectotherms means what? Cold-blooded. Hibernation usually takes place during extreme cold temperature, when the body decreases body temperature and slows heart rate and breathing to conserve energy. Okay, this is the process of hibernation. Now, estivation. Estivation refers to a state of inactivity in ectotherms. Ectotherm is what? Cold-blooded animal that works during extreme warm temperature Box turtles will estivate in the shallow forms or depressions in the soil. This allows them to stay moist or cool. So this is for your ectotherms. Ectotherms means what? They are the cold-blooded animals. Obviously, what? They will be there. They are much favorable towards the cold climate. But when the temperature will increase, what will happen? The temperature will increase. To survive in that particular temperature, their metabolic rates, it will increase. So to avoid those higher metabolic rate, they will go for the what? Estivation. That means what? They will create the holes in the soils and they will live over there. Burrows and they will live over there. This is process called what? Estivation without any sort of physical activity. Other is what? Brumination. It is being done by the reptiles. Brumation is the hibernation. Like the phases of inactivity in ectotherms during extreme cold temperature, box turtles will bury themselves in the leaves of the soil to keep warm during the cold winter months. Depending on the extremity of the temperature, a box turtle may bury itself. Or this particular brumation, it is being also carried out by reptiles. It is also being carried out by reptiles. Okay. Now, speciation is what? Speciation is an evolutionary process where a single ancestral species diverges into two or more distinct species, often due to geographical isolation, other factor leading to reproductive isolations or divergence. For example, here you can see that because of geographical border, because of ocean, because of lake, or because of anything, if suppose two individuals from the same species, if they are being departed because of geographical border, what? They will be developed into different individuals, they will develop into different species itself. So this is called your what? Speciation. For example, allopatric speciation occurs when a population is geographically separated, leading to the evolution of distinct species in isolated area. Okay, are you getting my point? Allotropic, that means self. Allo means what? Self. So individuals from the same species, they move to what? Different part of the continent, and because of these geographical boundaries, they have developed into different individual. Now they cannot breed among themselves. Now these two species, distinct species developed, cannot interbreed among themselves. This is very much important. Okay. When you talk about the species, one factor is what? Their reproduction capacity. If they can breed among themselves, that means what? They are not the different distinct species. Obviously, when you talk about the distinct species, what does it mean? It means that they cannot breed among themselves. They cannot interbreed among themselves. Okay. Other is what? Sympatric speciation occurs when within the same geographical area where the population evolved into distinct species due to the ecological isolation, genetic changes despite having same habitat. If they are living into the same habitat, but since living into the same habitat, because of certain genetic mutations, they have developed into different sort of other species itself. So this is your sympatric speciation. Clear? Other is your what? Parapatric speciation. Speciation occurs when the populations are in contact, but there is no physical barrier. But there is large geographical range that causes individuals to mate with the neighboring individuals more than those in the different part of the geographical range. And because of that, two distinct species are being created. So we have discussed about Darwinism. It talks about what? Survival of the fittest. That means what? Theory of natural selections. Here we do not consider any sort of genetic changes. Here we just consider what? Morphological changes, physiological changes, and what? Behavioral changes. Darwin's new traits are inherited, but he had no idea how. He did not know about DNA or genes. That's why neo-Darwinism comes into picture. When we talk about the speciation or the different species or adaptations that are being created considering what genetic mutations, there comes into picture your neo-Darwinism. This is your neo-Darwinism. So also known as modern synthesis, neo-Darwinism bridges the gap between Darwin's natural selections from Mendelian genetics. It explains the evolution of actually a change in the allele frequency, the favor of genes within the population over time. Is it? I have discussed. We have discussed about inheritance. Inheritance means what? 50% of the characters, they are what? Inherited. 50% are characters inherited from the parents. 50% from the mother side and 50% from the father side. For example, during sexual fertilization, zygote is being formed. That particular zygote, it contains what? 50% genetic material from the father, 50% genetic material from the mother. So this is called inheritance. Okay, that means what? Resemblance. But when you talk about the variations, now in the chromosomes, if you talk, there are two pairs of genes. One is the dominant and other is what? Recessive one. This is called allele gene. Now depends upon the climatic factor. Now depends upon the climatic factor. Certain genes, suppose certain genes, if it is dominant in India, okay. If you go to Canadian, if you go to tropic region, if you go to temperate region, maybe after generations of generations, that particular gene it will become recessive in nature, and other gene it will become dominant in nature. So why it becomes dominant? Because of genetic changes. So these things they have been considered in what? In your neo-Darwinism. That means what we consider genetic mutations. We consider what? Genetic mutations, genetic variations. They are also responsible for what? For the purpose of adaptations. So this neo-Darwinism is very much important. For example, if you are thinking of morphological, if you are thinking of physiological, if you are thinking of your behavior, all those things they have been associated with what? Genetic changes itself. So now presently if we talk about the adaptations, they are being concerned by your neo-Darwinism. For example, we have discussed with the bacteria. A particular bacteria, it will adapt to a particular ecosystem because of genetic mutations itself. The gene present in the plasmid, it should get mutated. It should change. It will change either by the process of conjunction, it will change by the process of transaction, or it will change by the process of what? Transformations. So here you can see genetic variations. This is the raw material. It happens through the mutations, random changes in the DNA, recombination, shuffling of genes during sexual reproductions. Natural selection, the environment filters the variations. If the mutations help organisms survive a drought or hide from the mutation, genes become more common. Okay, that means what we have discussed. In the allele, two genes are there. And because of one gene, suppose one gene, jo tha India mein, that is recessive in nature, if you go to Canadian climate, if you go to temperate regions, what? It will become dominant. And if those dominant genes, because of which I am surviving, it will pass through my generation to generation, it will become dominant. Genetic drift, random changes in the gene frequencies usually in small populations. Example, natural disaster, wiping out only the 3 brown beetles in the colony. Isolations, for a new species to form, a group must be separated by mountains, rivers, behavior can no longer. This is very much important. Isolation is very much important. And this particular isolation, it is one of the inherent concept of what? Speciation. That means what? The two species, if they are together, what will happen? They will start interbreeding. And because of the interbreeding, what will happen? Again, they will start coexisting. They will what? The genetic characters that are being developed, genetic development is there, that will be cancelled out. And because of that, isolation is what? Very much important. Okay. The functions of ecosystem. Functions of ecosystem. What are the different functions of an ecosystem? For example, energy flow. We have discussed when you talk about ecosystem, it's what functionally, that means what? It will be responsible for what? Energy flow. Second is what? Nutrient recycling process. Third is what? Productivity in an ecosystem, primary productivity and net productivity. Okay. Other is what? Decomposition. This decomposition is very much important so that what? The nutrients they are being recycled, formation, responsible for the formation of humus. And last is what? Homeostasis. Okay. Feedback loops. That means primary succession, secondary succession. आपने कल लास्ट टाइम पेपर दिया था ना? Primary succession, secondary succession, what is it? Yes. When you talk about the primary successions क्या है? Secondary successions occurs in the barren habitats. For example, rocks. When you talk about the forests, suppose this is the forest that is being developed. This is the forest. Forest is known as what? Climax community. But this forest, it is being developed from it start developing from the desert-like region. It start developing from the rocky-like region. Complete rocks are there. Consider a particular region 15,000 or 1500 years ago, or 1100 years ago, or 500 years ago, there was a complete barren rock. There was a complete desert itself. But slowly and gradually, that complete rock, that complete rocks, that complete desert, that complete barren area, it is being changed into the complete forest. So this is called your primary succession. This is called your primary succession means what? The development started from the barren land. Okay, barren land. So in this barren land, first what will happen? The first pioneer community, that means what? Lichens. Okay, they will come over there. Lichens. Okay, lichen is what? What is lichen? Sorry, what is lichen? It's a symbiotic relationship of what? Fungus and algae. So when you talk about pioneer succession is what? The succession, it will start from the barren land, rocks, desert, and the first community that will evade that particular region, it will be your lichens, mosses. They will, suppose, if you talk about the rocks आपने देखा ना पत्थर. If we talk about the rocks, what will happen? That the layer of lichens will get developed. Slowly and gradually, what will happen? They release the chemical, and because of that chemical, what will happen? The rocks जब होगा, they will start converting into soil. धीरे-धीरे what? They will get converted into soil. They will release the chemical. Those chemicals, they will be responsible for what? Diluting the rocks chemicals, and those rocks में जो phosphate होगा, sulfate होगा, they will start forming in the soil. The nutrient धीरे-धीरे क्या होगा? The nutrient will increase. Second, what will happen? Smaller plants, herbs which will get developed, shrubs it will get developed, and finally it will get developed into a climax community. That means your forest itself. So here you can see there will be your lichens, mosses. Okay, slowly and gradually what? Here formation of soil it will take place. Formation of soil it will take place, and slowly after that what? Grasses and weeds it will get developed. पहला घास ही होगा, grasses. After that what? Herbs it will get developed. फिर again shrubs it will get developed. Then finally it will move into the climax community. This is called your climax community. And from here to here, this is called your seral stages. Intermediate stage is called your seral stages. Okay, and this is your what? Pioneer stages. Pioneer stages. Okay. So from pioneer community to your climax community, the in between stages, they are called your seral stage. So when you talk about the primary succession, it takes a lot of time. Generally 200 to 300 years it will be taking the time, because it starts from the barren land. Lichens, lots of lichens, it has to settle over there. Then only what will happen? The rocks slowly and gradually it will start getting converted into the soil itself. So it will take a lot of years. Okay, slow process may take thousands of years. Okay, now this is the primary succession. Now what about the secondary succession? It occurs suppose consider there is a particular forest itself. Now this complete forest, because of the lightning, natural process of lightning, it has been completely burned. Now again it has to start. If completely burned means what? All the microbes that has been surviving inside the soil, that is responsible for what? Nitrogen fixation, they are being destroyed. Each and everything it is being destroyed. Now they have to go for again what? It has to what? Move toward the development of forest. So it will be starting from your secondary succession. That means what? So obviously it will be taking what? Few years. It will be taking few years. So this is called your secondary succession. So species type, primary community, lichens, mosses and fungi. Soil depth, because since it is starting on the desert, it is starting on the rock, little to none. When you talk about the seral communities, obviously what? After the pioneer community, they have started converted into what? Soil. So grasses, shrubs and pines, increasing depth and organic matter. Climax community, large hardwood, deep nutrient rich soils. Growth rate, fast growth, short lifespan. Seral communities, moderate. slow growth and long lifespan. But when you talk about the pioneer community, that is lichens, fast growth but shorter lifespan. Stability very low, it can be easily replaced. And it is what high when you talk the climax community, higher stability. Okay. Now, when you talk about the based on the habitat, for example, we have discussed primary success and secondary success, and we have also discussed in the primary successes what we have pioneer community to climax community. We have the several stages. For example, herbs, shrubs, they are the several stages. Even we have discussed about the several community when you discussed about the secondary success, and in the secondary success and what we have several stages. Now, based on the habitat, for example, hydrosphere starts in the water, pond, marsh, and forest. This pond, it will get converted into your forest itself. So this is called your hydrarchy. Now Gerard starts from the dry rocks like lichens, mosses, and forest. Halocene in saline water. Okay. Now based on drivers, we have what? Autogenic and allogenic. So auto means what? Changes of species driven by biological process, changing conditions and resources. The plants themselves causes successes to occur, light capture, productions, example, organisms living, then dying on the bedrock. For example, when you talk about like primary succession it is what? Autogenic in nature. Autogenic, because we have discussed that when you talk about the primary successions, it start on the barren rock itself, and there they are being invaded with what? Lichens, mosses, and fungi, and from that conversion of soil, sterile community, final climax community. Because so that is being started with the help of biological things. So change of species driven by the biological process, changing conditions and resources. So autogenic, and dying, and then bedrock. For example, primary succession. Okay. Now allogenic successions. Serial replacement of the species driven by the changing external geophysical process, silt deposition in the pond, changing it from the aquatic to a terrestrial habitat. So these are the example of secondary successions. For example, there is a pond. Consider there is a pond in my village. Okay, so it was thriving and sustaining in nature, but suddenly what happened? Flood, and because of the flood, heavy siltations, and now because of the heavy siltations, what happened? Good afternoon, all of you. So now we are going to study what? Homeostasis in ecosystem. What is this process called homeostasis? Okay. That means in a very simple language, homeostasis means what? The stability of the ecosystem. It maintains stability of the ecosystem. For example, our body also perform homeostasis. You might be knowing what is the internal body temperature for body. It's 38 degrees Celsius. Okay, if the temperature is very high outside, what will happen? Our body using this temperature, it will go by the go of process of what? Perspiration. That means what? It is going to release the heat, and the water that is being released, it is going to cool our body. Is it okay that our body also maintains what? Stability. Similarly, when you talk about the ecosystem, they are also responsible for maintaining their stability. So that we call it is what? Homeostasis in ecosystem. For example, and this is being maintained with the help of two things, that is called the negative feedback loop and positive feedback loop. Okay, see, remember one thing over here. In the news, climate tipping points are here. Climate tipping points is there. Okay. So here we are maintaining the stability of the ecosystem using two feedback loops. We are having two stability, self-regulating ability. That means what? Stability. And this particular stability, it is being maintained with the help of what? Negative feedback loop. And the other is what? Positive feedback loop. Okay. From this thing, I expect one question, because there are 3 articles related to it. 4 articles related to it in the newspaper. Okay, na? So I will tell you which one is important. Try to understand this basic concept. So this stability, it is maintained by the loop. For example, our body get heated up. It's a heated up, and because of this, what? For the purpose of thermoregulations, we are going to release sweat, perspiration. Clear, hai na? And because of this, our body, it will maintain the temperature. Similarly, when you talk about the ecosystem, the mechanism for regulation, ecosystem maintains balance primarily through feedback loop. For the stability of ecosystem, self-sustaining nature of the ecosystem, negative feedback loop is very much important. Negative feedback loop is very much important. If negative feedback loop is operating, that means what? The ecosystem, it has the tendency that it can what? Maintain its stability. Okay. So example, predator prey cycle. Predator prey cycle. For example, if in a particular grassland, system, grassland ecosystem, the population of rabbit grows, what will happen? Population of rabbit will grow. What will happen? Fox will have more food, and because of that, if the fox will have more food, they will become very much energetic. They will go for the replication process. Simultaneously, what will happen? The population of fox will increase, and if there are more foxes, what will happen? The population of rabbit will decrease. And since the population of rabbit is being decreased, now the population of fox will also be maintained. This is called the negative feedback loop. Is it okay? So negative feedback loop. See the name, stabilizer. It is what? It is responsible for the stability of the ecosystem. Is it okay? That means what? For any sort of ecosystem, this negative feedback loop, it should operate. Other is what? Nutrient cycling. If there is an excess of certain nutrients, the plant growth accelerates. But when the plant growth is accelerates, what will happen? The plant will take up the excess nutrient, and because of that, what? Stability will get created. This positive feedback loop, that this is called the destabilizer. If it operates, it is responsible for what? Destabilizing the ecosystem. Destabilizing the ecosystem is because of positive feedback loop. Is it okay? So this is important for climate tipping point. Write it down. I will tell you which one is important. First, let me know. Okay. So positive feedback loop, the destabilizer, it is responsible for what? Climate tipping point. Okay. It's there in your newspaper, in your news. Okay, climate tipping point. Okay. So unlike the negative feedback, they amplify the changes while usually associated with the ecosystem collapse. Okay, now when you talk about the climate tipping point, okay, that means what? There is a certain limitations of after which if the climate is being destabilized, that means what? It cannot return back to its original state, and it's because of what? Positive feedback loop. For example, forest fire. If there is a forest fire, what will happen? Because of the forest fire heat, the adjacent trees, they will also get heated up. They will also become the dry wood. Complete forest will get destroyed. Okay, so we'll discuss. This is the basic. Now, factors. Why are discussing a lot? Because two articles are there. That is why we have to discuss a lot. For example, key factors supporting homeostasis. First is what? Biodiversity. There, this is the insurance policy of the nature. If an ecosystem, for example, in the ecosystem, if we are having 10 nitrogen fixations bacteria are there, if some of them are eliminated, also that nature it is having the tendency that it can stabilize. Certain bacteria are also there, they can go for the nitrogen fixation process. So obviously, if in an ecosystem there is more diversity, that means what? There is more possibility that means that ecosystem it will remain in the stable state. Is it okay? That means what? वहाँ पे क्या होगा? Negative feedback loop it will operate more frequently, and because of the negative feedback loop क्या होगा? The ecosystem it will be in stable condition. Is it okay? विनय ठीक है. Energy flow. A consistent input of energy, usually solar, is required to power the process that maintain order. Without energy, the system succumbs to entropy. Entropy is what is entropy? Entropy is what? Degree of orderness of a molecule. That means what? The system is completely disturbed. ठीक है? Other is what? Carrying capacity. Every environment has maximum population it can support. Homeostasis ensures that the population do not permanently overshoot this limit, preventing total resources exhaustion. Obviously, for example, we have discussed the negative feedback loop. If the population of rabbit is high, it will increase. What will happen? It will lead to the increase of the forest. It will lead to the increase in the number of fox, and because the fox is increased, what they will take up this, they will eat up this rabbit. Rabbit population has been decreased. उसके कारण क्या होगा? Obviously the fox population will decrease. But when we talk about the ecosystem is having certain carrying capacity. The populations of the species residing in that particular ecosystem should not go beyond that carrying capacity. ठीक है ना? Okay. Other is what? Resilience and resistance. Resistance, the ability of the ecosystem to remain unchanged, hit by the disturbance. This is called what? Resistance. Resist. It will resist the change. Resilience means what? If it is being disturbed also, there is a it is having the capacity that it can bounce back to its original state. It can come back to its original state. This is called resilience. Human impact and tipping point. While ecosystems are incredibly hardy, they have tipping points. If a disturbance like a pollution, deforestation, climate change too intense, the negative feedback loop fails. We have discussed. And what will happen because of this? Because of what? Human intervention. Okay, responsible for climate change, responsible for deforestation. What will happen? The positive feedback loop, it will operate. That positive feedback loop, what? It's going to disturb what? Homeostasis process. That means what? The self-sustaining nature of the ecosystem will get disturbed. Climate tipping point. ठीक है ना? So यहाँ देख सकते हैं the climate tipping point context, warm water coral reef have crossed their thermal tipping point, triggering irreversible dieback. We have discussed the system of dieback. We have discussed in the beginning of the classes dieback. That means is okay. Similarly, when you talk about the coral reefs, if the temperature, for example, when you talk about the Paris Climate Change Agreement, there what is our target? We have target that the temperature should be within 2 degrees Celsius, but we are maximum trying that we should keep the temperature within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now the temperature is constantly increasing, and because of that, you can see that warm coral reefs have crossed their thermal tipping point. That means what? Now, if this coral reef ecosystem, if this coral reef they are being disturbed, what will happen? Homeostasis process, it will get disturbed. That means all the self-sustaining nature of what coral reefs will get disturbed. Is it okay? Okay. This climate tipping point, because now since this climate tipping point it was there in the news, okay, it is not necessary that from this particular topic questions can be out. Obviously what we have discussed in the beginning, a basic statement can be developed out of it. ठीक है ना? ठीक. A status, coral reefs tomorrow we will study. Okay, coral reefs, the tipping point, the scientists estimate the thermal limit of reef is around at 1.2 degree of warming. Current global level is 1.4 degree. Okay, that means what? A coral reef जो है, the maximum temperature it can sustain is 1.2 degrees Celsius. But what is the present state of temperature now? 1.4 degrees Celsius. Mass bleaching, the ongoing fourth global bleaching event has impacted around 84% of the reefs in around 83 countries. Irreversible dieback, frequent marine heat waves, ecosystem flattening. As complex coral die, they are replaced by the macroalgae. Human impact collapse threatens 1 billion people who rely on reefs for food, tourism, and coastal protections. ठीक है ना? You might be knowing that when you talk about the coral reefs. ठीक है ना? For example, you have studied about the mangroves plantations. Okay, this mangrove plantations, they are acting as a shield against cyclones, है ना? 2004 you can consider cyclone, tsunami waves. So they act as a shield. Similarly, when you talk about the coral reefs, they also act as a what, shield against those cyclones. And apart from that, when you talk about the biodiversity कहाँ high है? What is when you talk about the terrestrial ecosystem, the biodiversity is highest for terrestrial ecosystem. Equatorial rainforest. Okay, there we have the maximum number of species. Okay, species richness is there in terms of biodiversity. On the other hand, when we talk about like in the marine ecosystem, coral reefs. Is it okay? Okay. Now climate tipping point. We have this. These are your 9 climate tipping points are there. Climate tipping points. The world had already crossed 9 tipping points that will lead to catastrophic climate change. Scientists have warned. These are the Amazon rainforest. They are being disturbed. That means what climate tipping point is what we have discussed. Because of human intervention, what will happen? The negative feedback loops, they are being suppressed, and the positive feedback loop, it will get operated. And because of this, the ecosystem, it will what, lose its ability for what, homeostasis, and it will be permanently in the dieback stage. समझ में आ गया ना? Is it okay? ठीक. UPSC is very much notorious for the purpose of capturing these words, positive feedback loop, negative feedback loop, and generally people जो है, they will take this positive feedback loop, they will take this what, negative feedback loop, है ना? And वो statement क्या हो जाएगा? Statement is what, reverse in nature. Negative feedback loop here is what, bad. Negative feedback loop is what, it's good for the stability of the ecosystem, for the self-sustained nature of the ecosystem, but positive feedback loop is what, it's bad. लेकिन statement examination में देगा तो क्या होगा? अगर आपने नहीं पढ़ा है तो पॉजिटिव टिक करना है, ठीक है? ओके, सो हियर वी हैव व्हाट, अमेज़न रेन फॉरेस्ट, बोरियल फॉरेस्ट, ग्रीनलैंड आइस शीट, वेस्ट अंटार्कटिका आइस शीट, आर्टिक आइस शीट, अटलांटिक सर्कुलेशन. वी विल स्टडी दिस. कोरल रीफ्स, परमानेंट फ्रॉस्ट, विल्किस बेसिन. नाउ this term, it can be included like Gaia hypothesis proposed by the chemist suggests that the earth and its biological system behave as a single self-regulating entity. For example, I have discussed that our body also perform what, homeostasis process. Is it okay? We have discussed. Similarly, when you talk about the ecosystem, they also perform what, they are acting as a living entity. That means what, they are having the capacity for what, homeostasis. That means what, they can take the feedback from positive feedback loop and negative feedback loop and act simultaneously. And this was being proposed under this particular hypothesis. Okay. Okay. Core principle of Gaia, the hypothesis treats the earth like a giant organism, and thus the earth uses biological process to maintain its own body. The biosphere, co-evolution, life and the environment evolve together as a single system. Homeostasis, the system uses feedback loop to maintain the state of equilibrium suitable for life. We have discussed a lot of examples. Self-sustaining nature, that means what, maintaining stability. Okay. All those things, whatever studied, that comes under what, your homeostasis process. That means what, the system should what, be stable in nature, self-sustaining in nature. Okay, so system generally operates with the help of negative feedback loop and positive feedback loop, but because of human intervention, that means with climate change, pollutants, global warming, what happens or not? So obviously what, one link in the food web, it will get extinct, and the species that are dependent upon the mosquito, they will get also extinct. And because of this, the biodiversity is being impacted. Now this biodiversity is impacting, that means what, the negative feedback loop, it is being suppressing, and because of that, it is going to disturb the homeostasis of ecosystem. समझ में आ रहा सभी को ना? Is it okay? The question देखिए, what we are studying, it will not be directly asked. यू हैव टू कोरिलेट, जो भी न्यूज में चल रहा है वैसे क्वेश्चंस बन जाएंगे. इज इट ओके? Okay. Now, healthy ecosystem are the base for wide range of economic, environmental, and aesthetic goods and services. The product of ecosystem process are named as ecosystem services. For example, the food, raw materials, wood, medicines, fresh water, it's comes under provisioning, ठीक है ना, regulating, cultural and supporting. These are all comes under your ecosystem services. Go through it. For example, recreation, tourism, aesthetic values. These all are the what? Ecosystem services, particularly categorized into what? Cultural activities. Okay. Supporting photosynthesis, nutrient cycle, soil formation, they are all what? Ecosystem services. Just a moment. Try to solve this question. C, 1 and 3, correct. Okay. A tipping point is a threshold where the small changes push a system into a completely new, often self-sustaining state. A tipping point is a threshold, okay, where small changes can push. ठीक है. Most climate tipping points are considered reversible within a human storage time cycle if emissions are immediately brought to net zero. Third, the albedo effect is primarily feedback mechanism driving the Arctic Sea ice tipping point. Most climate tipping points are considered reversible within a human storage time scale if emissions are immediately brought to zero. What will this? सोच के बताएं. Most लिखा हुआ है ना, स्टेटमेंट क्या होगा? ट्रू होगा. Because we have discussed कि when you talk about this climate tipping points, they comes under what? Homeostasis process. Homeostasis means what? Self-regulating stage, self-sustaining stage. Okay, and but because of human intervention, they are being totally disturbed. Now, human intervention means what? Emissions in terms of carbon dioxide that is responsible for global warming. Okay, if it is being regulated, what will happen? It will be within tipping point. The most climate tipping points are considered reversible within human storage time scale if emissions are immediately brought zero. This is also true. Third, the albedo effect is primary feedback mechanism driving the Arctic Sea tipping point. The albedo effect is a primary feedback mechanism driving the Arctic Sea ice tipping point. क्या होगा इसका आंसर? What is albedo effect? So when you talk about the Arctic ice, I have discussed when you talk about the Arctic ice, okay, no doubt we have a lot of temperature over there, but this ice, they are maintaining their cryospheric region, they are maintaining their ice sheet. What is the reason? Because of albedo effect. Because albedo effect means what? Reflectivity of the lights. So statement is what? The albedo effect is the primary feedback mechanism driving the Arctic ice tipping point. It's also true. All the statements, they are what? True. Okay. Now, this is also in your current affair, planetary boundaries. Okay, planetary boundaries. Write it down for you. This means prelims important 2026. First, climate tipping point. Climate tipping point. Climate tipping point in correlation with positive feedback, negative feedback, positive feedback, negative feedback, human anthropogenic intervention in bracket है उसी में anthropogenic intervention responsible for responsible for accelerating positive feedback loop. Okay. Second, 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 write it down. This is the first. Okay, first question. Okay, second, climate tipping point in correlation with planetary boundaries. Climate tipping point in correlation with planetary boundaries. Okay. क्या टाइम जब से होलोसीन पीरियड से बात कर रहे हैं हम लोग होलोसीन पीरियड ज्योग्राफी कंप्लीटेड है ना होलोसीन वी मस्ट बी नोइंग दैट वी आर इन द क्वाटरनरी स्टेज होलोसीन पीरियड है ना 10,000 ईयर्स ओके सिंपल है देखिए डू नॉट गेट मतलब कॉम्प्लिकेटेड इफ नेट जीरो एमिशंस इफ लिखे मोस्ट ऑफ द लिखा है ऑल अगर ऑल द इकोसिस्टम्स दे हैव द पावर फॉर व्हाट रिवर्सिंग दैट मीन दैट स्टेटमेंट इट विल बी रॉन्ग इन नेचर इट्स ओके ना लेकिन वहां लिखे मोस्ट ऑफ द इकोसिस्टम ठीक है नाउ दिस इज आल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस कांसेप्ट द प्लैनेटरी हेल्थ चेक 2025 has warned that 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries have now been breached. That means what? They have crossed their climate tipping point. Okay, breached. That means what? In technical, they have crossed their I will let you know one example. वो statement क्यों बना है? I will just let you know. Okay. They have crossed their climate tipping point. Okay. So about planetary health check, PHC. PHC is a global scientific assessment of the Earth system health, tracking ecological threshold that keep the planet habitable. See, go through the statement. If you go through the different magazines, I cannot take the name of those magazines. Okay. If you go through the different magazines, okay, this statement, it will be there. But UPSC is what? UPSC is what? UPSC will go through the statement. In this statement, it will be what? Totally changed. And it into develop into new statement. And often the student, they will complain that, कि sir questions यहाँ से नहीं पूछे गए. ठीक है ना? Okay, तो यहाँ क्या लिखा हुआ है? PSC is a global scientific assessment of the Earth system, tracking an ecological threshold that keep the planet habitable. Okay. The 2025 report warns that 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries are now breached. That means what? They have crossed. With the latest one is what? Ocean acidification crossing the. Latest one is what? The 7th one is what? Ocean acidification. Ocean acidification means what? Ocean acidification. Assimilations of carbon dioxide into oceanic water, and because of that carbonic acid is being formed, and because of the carbonic acid, what will happen? Little bit acidification. We will discuss. Okay, na? I will discuss. It highlights how human activities like fossil fuel combustion, deforestation, unsustainable agriculture, industrial wells are driving Earth beyond its self-operating space. First time in 11,000 years. That means what we are talking about? Holocene period. Holocene period. Okay. I think geography is completed. ठीक है. So it was in 2009. In 2009, 7 boundary we have assessed. Out of it, 3 have already crossed. But latest 9 boundaries we have taken into consideration, and 7 have already crossed their tipping point. Okay. ठीक है. यहाँ देखेंगे. Please have a look over here. Now these are the 9 boundaries, planetary boundaries that we have selected. What are those? Here you can see. If you consider ocean acidification, this is the 7th one. This has crossed its tipping point. Is it okay? The tipping point means what? In other sense, irreversible changes. What? irreversible changes. It has crossed tipping points. Okay, oxygen acidification, phosphorus cycle, and nitrogen cycle. So when you talk about this nutrient recycling process, nutrient recycling, for example, when we're discussing the homeostasis process, there we have discussed the example of nutrient recycling. This also creates for positive and negative loops. So this also, it's so important planetary boundary. Okay, modifications because of what? Because of excessive use of what? Urea, fertilizers. ठीक है ना? Okay, green water and blue water, important. Green water and blue water. Land system change in the biosphere integrity, functional integrity, genetic diversity, climate change. Okay, introduction of novel entities, microplastic, problem of what? Microplastic pollutions. Novel entities, what? Microplastic pollutions. Okay, stratospheric ozone and atmospheric aerosol. Okay, okay, now what we have discussed, out of these 9 boundaries, 7 had crossed their climate tipping point. Now what are the 2 that is being left? The 2 that is being left is your what? Stratospheric ozone depletion and atmospheric aerosol. Okay, these 2 are what? They are within the limit. They are what? Within the limit. Okay, for example, clear? ठीक है ना? For example, the statement, what was the statement? Second statement, Ayan, what was the second statement? Most of the ecosystem reversible in nature if we achieve net zero emissions by 2070 itself. Okay, why this particular statement? Because here you can see that, oh, there was a lot of concern regarding the ozone depletion, but what? Because of proper implementation of Montreal Protocol. Okay, because of proper Montreal Protocol, what? Now this particular stratospheric ozone, it is within the limit. It is what? Within the minimum. The minimum, it should be a 277 Dobson unit. Okay, but presently it is around 287 to 290. That means what? Still, maybe the next year it will also get included. But presently what? It is within the limit. Why? Because under Montreal Protocol we have totally banned the use of what? Chlorofluorocarbons. Is it? It is matching with the statement. आपको समझ में आ गया statement क्यों बना है? Okay, and this is what? Atmospheric aerosol. That means what? The concentration of pollutant matters, dust particles into your atmospheric region. Clear? तो एक क्वेश्चन इसलिए, that is the question. That is why I have given you the second. जो second आपको जो important मैंने point समझाया था, that is your planet boundaries coupled with what? Climate tipping point. एक दोनों में से जो है, there is strong possibility one questions can be framed. Okay. Go through this question. What will be the answer? Why? What is green water? Yes, very good. Na? See, we have, for example, we have in this planetary boundaries, we are considering what? When we talk about the water, okay, the water, they are being divided into 2 types of water. One is called the green water, other is what? Called the blue water. Now, green water is what? It's the soil moisture. the moisture that is being present inside the soil, in between the soil porosity. It's called your root joint soil moisture. It's called your green water. Green water. Okay. Green water. And this particular water, it will be taken by the plant with what? Capillary action. Clear? First thing. Second thing is what? The blue water. The blue water is, they are what? They are your groundwater. They are your what? Ground table water. Okay, so they are your surface runoff, subsurface runoff, and base flow. They will be under your what? Groundwater. They will be under your what? Blue water. ठीक है ना? For example, when you talk about the hydrological cycle, suppose for example, after rain shower, what will happen? If you have the lot of aquifers, okay, if you have the lot of aquifer, what will happen? Those aquifers, they will be responsible for recharging your ground table, recharging your groundwater. So now the recharging of groundwater, the groundwater, it's what? It's your blue water. Surface excessive amount of water. If you do not have the aquifers, excessive amount of groundwater, they will be what? Moving into the river. So that will be answered. That will be also your what? Blue water. But when you talk about the in between the soil particles, if the moistures that are being entrapped, they will be your what? Green water. ठीक है ना? Okay. So green water planetary boundaries, it refers to the water that is stored in the soil and is used by the plant for transpiration process. True. Second is what? The transgression of this boundary is primarily caused by the over extraction of groundwater. So when you talk about the over extraction, it is responsible for what? Depleting of water table, dropping of water table. It is not responsible for your soil moisture. Soil moisture को हम लोग निकालते नहीं है ना? Is it okay? So this is not applicable. A decrease in green water availability can directly impact the frequency of forest fire. How? क्या होगा? A decrease in the green water availability can directly impact the frequency of forest fire. How? Please do let me know. You have to correlate. Suppose if there is a availability of green water, okay, in the huge amount, what will happen? In the forest जो है, in the, suppose when you talk about the forest fire, it takes place in the month of June, July, August, September, something like that, when the temperature is very high. Okay. अब यहाँ पे क्या होगा? We have the abundance of this green water, and because of that, continuously evapotranspiration will take place in the vicinity. What? Moisture particles होंगे, and the heat, जो temperature, the heat that is responsible for causing those forest fire, they will be responsible for what? Evaporating this water. तो उससे क्या होगा? Forest fire कम होंगे. But in the dry region, there is a strong possibility of forest fire. ठीक है ना? 1 and 3. Okay. So I hope at least one questions can be expected from this particular reason. बहुत अच्छा स्कोप है यहाँ पे. ठीक है? And see what we will be doing from our next classes. We will be practicing a lot of questions. Okay, now for every topic, if I feel like this particular topic seems to be very much important, we will be practicing two to three questions. Concept is totally different, and practicing makes makes you more efficient in your examination. Okay, now food chain. You're aware of it? Food chain. Food chain is what? It's a linear sequence. For example, here you can see plants, they are the primary producers, autotrophers. It will be taken by the what? Herbivorous consumers, insects. It will be taken by the mouse. It will be taken by the all. Okay, so this is what? A food chain. It's a what? Linear sequence. So food chain is a what? Linear sequence illustrating how energy and nutrients transfer between the organisms. When you talk about the energy transfer, they are being governed by 10% rule. Energy transfer, they are being governed by 10% rule. 10% rule. 10% rule. They are being governed by 10% rule. 10% rule. Okay. When you talk about the energy transfer, they are being governed by 10% rule. For example, consider one example. Consider for one example. For example, we have 10,000 kilocalorie. 10,000 kilocalorie. Okay. This is what this energy. It's from what? Sun energy. So when you talk about the plant, it will take how much? 10%. That means what? How much? 1,000. From this plant, if it moves to next primary consumer, it will become 100. Here it will become 10. Here what? 1. And because of this 10% rule, okay, we have pyramids of energy, pyramids of biomass. They have limited trophic levels. They have what? 4 to 5 trophic level. Uske baad, if suppose if there is another trophic level, 2, 3, 4, 5. After that, what? 0.01%. Is it? 1.1%. Uske baad 0.01%. So these things are not being considered. So the energy flow, they are being governed by 10% rule. Okay. From this you can see which seems to be more beneficial to human body, veg or non-veg. Why? Because if you're taking the veg, what will happen? If you take, for example, if you're taking the fruits, there's a strong possibility that you'll get good amount of energy. Good amount of energy. But if you're taking non-veg and all those things, they are responsible for building your masses because of कम समय तो I am talking with respect to the same biomass. 100 gram of leaves. If you consider 100 gram of leaf with that of the 100 grams of chicken available in the market, 100 grams. It's not like that you will take 5 leaves and there's 5 leaves you will consider with the 1 kg of non-veg chicken. 5 leaves means how much? It will be 50 gram. 50 gram, 30 gram, something like that. You take 30 gram non-veg, then compare it. हाँ ठीक है. So this is your food chain. Is a linear. Okay, now we have what? Detritus food chain. We have discussed. This is what detritus is. What? It's a microorganism that's responsible for breaking down those that organic matter into your smaller particles, so that you're increasing the surface area, so that what? Saprophytes, saprotroph, they can act on it for the purpose of what? Releasing the nutrient. So for example, here you can see this is the another food. That is a food chain. Leaf litter. Okay, algae will act. This algae, it will be taken by crab, small fishes, large fishes. This is in the mangrove ecosystem. Okay, decomposition we'll see afterwards. Food web. So food web is a complex interconnected network of multiple food chains that illustrate feeding relationship and energy flow within the ecosystem. We have discussed the food chain. The food chain is a what? Linear mechanism, but hardly if you go through the different ecosystem, very difficult to find a what? Linear food chain. That means what? It is completely cross-linked. It is what? Interconnected one. Okay. Biotic interactions. Effects of one organisms on other organisms in a community. For example, we have amensalism, we have commensalism, we have symbiotic relationship, we have mutualism. So these are the different biotic interactions. So here you can see biotic interactions are of 2 types basically. First is what? Intraspecific and what? Interspecific. Intraspecific means what? This is okay. Interspecific means what? Intra means what? Between individuals of the same species. ठीक है ना? Interactions. And intraspecific means what? Between individuals belonging to the different species. Okay. For example, amensalism. A symbiotic relationship in which one species is harmed or inhibited while the other is unaffected. Means what? For example, okay. Here what will happen? One species is what? Harmed and other is what? Interspecific.
Interspecific is different between different species. Intraspecific is
Okay, maybe just let me come. Yes, intraspecific means what? They occur between individuals of same species, and inter means what? They occur between individuals of different species. Okay. Now here is what? Amensalism, a symbiotic relation in which one species is harmed and or while the other is what? Affected. For example, one species it will get harmed and other remains what? Unaffected. For example, here you can see black walnut trees and nearby plant. Okay, so black walnut trees releases zaglon into the soil, inhibiting the growth of nearby plants. So it will release this particular chemical, and because of this particular chemical, what will happen? The growth of the other plant, they are getting affected. Is it okay? So this is the what? Negative, and this is what? Zero. It is not getting affected, but this is what? Negatively getting affected. The other is what? Penicillin and the bacteria. What is penicillin? It's an antibiotic. Okay, so if penicillin is being released, what will happen? It is going to affect the growth of bacteria. This, if a particular ecosystem, suppose if this fungus, if it releases penicillin, what will happen? In that particular ecosystem, the bacteria cannot survive over there. So this is what? Zero, and this is what? Negative. That means what? Okay. Elephants and the small burrowing animals. Elephant disrupt the nest and harm the burrowing animals, but in other these burrowing animals, do you think they can have any effect on the elephant? Nothing. This is amensalism. So these examples, go through these examples. Okay, now what is commensalism? Commensalism is a type of relationship between two living organisms in which one organism benefits from the other without harming it. Without harming it. That means what? Here is what? One organisms get benefited. Positive and okay. For example, tree frogs uses plant for protections. Cattle aggregates at the insect stirred up by the cattle when they are grazing. Clear? So one is what? Positively, other is what? No effect. Parasites. Parasite is a symbiotic relationship in which one organism benefits while the other is what? Harm. We say sometimes we say, no, this my friend is a parasite. We should not to say, if we are considering, we should change this statement. We should say this fellow is a parasite. We should never use this statement. If we have quoted friend, then how come a friend is a parasite? So, for example, okay, tick and dog. Tick and dog. How? Which one is getting benefited and which one is negatively impacted? Dog is negatively impacted and tick is what? Benefited. Is it okay? Similarly, you can see this other examples. Barnacles and whales. You must have seen in the reels. Barnacles, they are famous in the reels itself. The barnacles, they will attach onto the whale surfaces. They will be responsible for what? Extracting the nutrients. So obviously, it is getting benefited positively. And the whales, they are what? Negatively impacted. Okay. Now, mutualism, example, mutualism is what? The both will get benefited. Both will get benefited. So, for example, rhizobium, the leguminous plants. Rhizobium, they are the what? Nitrogen fixations bacteria. They will convert atmospheric nitrogen into what? Ammonia. And after that, it will get converted to nitrite, and they will be taken by the plant. So, both of them are benefited. Bees and the flowers, they are responsible for what? Pollination, self-pollination and cross-pollination. And because of this, ultimately you can see that this pollination is nothing but it's responsible for what? Replication of these particular plants. Okay? Gut bacteria in the humans. Okay, gut bacteria. What is the significance of the gut bacteria? Why with digestions? Is it okay? So both of them, we are getting benefited. Fungi and algae, lichen. Okay. Now, mutualism. What is the difference between mutualism and proper symbiotic relationship? Proper symbiotic relationship. Some mutualisms are so intimate that interacting species can no longer live without each other, as they depend totally on each other to survive. They are dependent. For example, if you talk about this bees and honeys, this is a concept of proper mutualism. Because suppose if there are certain flowers, if they are not getting pollinated also, it won't get affected. उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला है. But when you talk about the symbiotic relationship, for example, this lichen is a symbiotic relationship of what? Algae and fungi. So fungus, when you talk about the fungus, it provides the substrate, it provides the area, okay, over which what? Algae can live and sustain. When you talk about the algae, they are what? Primary producer. They will carry out the process of photosynthesis. And the food that is being produced, it is being shared. Is it okay? So ultimately, if anything is being removed, do you think the system can survive? They cannot survive. So this is the example of your symbiotic relationship. Any other examples of symbiotic relationship from your side? Coral reefs and? Okay, is it? Achha. So here you can see an example of such close mutualistic association is that of termite and their intestinal flagellates. Termites and in their gut means what? Gastrointestinal tract. Intestine, what we have? Flagellates. They are what? A proper example of symbiotic relationship. Termites can eat wood but have no enzymes to digest it. Wood means what? When you talk about the wood, it is being derived from the plant. So plant means what? They will have plants cell wall, and those cell wall, they are being made from cellulose. So those cellulose, it is very difficult to be digested by this termite, and for the purpose of digesting those cellulose, these termites, they have what? Flagellates. So how about the intestine? Contains certain flagellate protozoans that have the necessary enzyme to digest the cellulose of the wood eaten by the termites and convert it into sugar. The flagellates use some of the sugar for their own metabolism, or others left for the termite. Okay, the cellulose taken by the wood, it is very difficult to digest it. So ultimately, in the intestine, what we have? Flagellate. These flagellates, it is responsible for the digestion of cellulose. And if the cellulose it is being digested, what is being released? Sugar. So certain fractions it will be taken by the flagellates, and rest it will be utilized by the wood. So it's a proper example of what your symbiotic. If any of them is being removed, ultimately what? They cannot exist. Now, neutralism. Neutralism describes the relationship between the two species which do not interact, which do interact but do not affect each other. There is an interaction, but they are not going to affect each other. It is to describe the interaction where the fitness of one species is absolutely no effect whatsoever on the other. The true neutralism is extremely unlikely and impossible to prove. Obviously, in the biotic interaction, because of the existence of one particular species, it will be what? Affecting the other. For example, deer and the rabbit, wild-tailed deer and the rabbits can occupy the same woodlands area, feeding on the different food sources without interacting. दोनों रह सकता है ना? Fox and the rabbit, what will happen? Do you think fox and the rabbit they are your examples of your neutralism? So fox and the rabbit, it will be coming under your competition. Okay. Now we'll start with what? Trophic level. Okay, what is trophic level? Energy flows. Okay. So trophic level, trophy means nourishment, represents energy flow in the ecosystem. Energy flow in the ecosystem. Is it? Now, when you talk about the terrestrial ecosystem and when you talk about the marine ecosystem, okay, energy flow, it will always be what? Upright in nature. It will be always in what? Upright in nature. Okay. Energy flow, why? Because we have discussed when we talk about the energy flow, they are being governed by the 10% rule. From each trophic level, if it moves from one trophic level to another trophic level, what will happen? 10% only. Next, 10%. So here if you are having suppose 100 kilojoule, here it will be 10, here it will be 1, here it will be 0.1, and because of this what we have? Upright energy flow. If you consider terrestrial ecosystem, for the terrestrial ecosystem, what will be considering? Terrestrial ecosystem, primary producers, autotrophs, green plants, they are forming the base, so ultimately they are responsible for conversion of what? Sunlight into the sunlight energy into what? Starch. And so this is a starch, and after it what? It will be governed by the 10% rule. It will be upright. When you talk about, this is for your terrestrial suppose, and if you talk about aquatic ecosystem, in aquatic ecosystem what we have? Phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons, okay, that goes in the photic zone, that is grows in the what? Photic zone, that can be illuminated with light. Now in that what will happen? Photic zone. So zooplankton, they will be responsible for what? Trapping of the sunlight. They will undergo the process of photosynthesis. Okay. उसके बाद क्या होगा? It will be taken by small fishes, a bigger fishes, bigger fishes. But obviously that will be also be governed by the formula of what? 10% rule. So ये भी क्या होगा? It will be always upright in nature. So if you talk about, when you talk about the trophic level that represent the energy, it will be always what? Upright in nature. ठीक है? Okay. So the trophic level of an organism is the position is occupied in the food chain. Energy flows through the trophic level from the producer to the subsequent trophic level. For example, this is what a trophic level. Okay. Here, when you talk about this trophic level, it represents what? At the bottom, it represents what? The number of primary producers. The number of primary producers have been represented. Primary producers. Okay. And here what? Movement of energy, they are being governed by 10% rule. For example, here you can see 1000 kilojoule, 10,000, 1,000, 100, and because of that, when you talk about the trophic level, they are limited. We consider how much? 3, 4 to 5 trophic level. After that, it is not possible to represent the energy. Here, how much energy will come? Okay, na? And this is why when you talk about the trophic level, they are limited up to 5 to maximum 5. Okay. Now, what is bioaccumulation and biomagnification? Bioaccumulation and biomagnifications. There are certain chemicals. The chemical, it should be stable in nature. The chemical, it should be stable in nature. For example, when we talk about vitamins, vitamins are of two types. One is what? Fat soluble vitamins, and what other is what? Water soluble vitamins. What are the example of water soluble vitamins? Yes. What are the example of water soluble and fat soluble vitamins? Yes, vitamins. When you talk about like fat soluble, ADEK, they are the fat soluble, and when you talk about like water soluble, it's what? Vitamin B12, vitamin B, and vitamin C. Okay. So for example, if we have certain problems or weaknesses, something like that, we without consulting doctors, we take certain form of vitamins belongs to the vitamin B12 or C. We do not need to consult the doctor. Hai na? I cannot name those. Okay. Why so? Because it is water soluble in nature. You will take it, you will get the requisite energy, nutrients, and after that, what? In the next day, in the process of urination, they will be released, and urine seems to be what? Yellow in color. It's okay. So उसमें ज़्यादा impact नहीं होता. But if you talk for like vitamin, fat soluble vitamins, their metabolites, it retains in your body, and because of that, for taking those, you have to consult the doctor. Similarly, when you talk about the certain chemical things, also they have the potential that they can be fat soluble and water soluble. Okay, fat soluble and water soluble chemicals. Chemicals, they should be what? Fat soluble, and other is what? Water soluble. Okay, fat soluble, that means what? It can be absorbed into the fat. Okay, so for the purpose of bioaccumulation is what? The chemicals, it is having the capacity that it can bioaccumulate, it can enter inside our cell and tissues and being absorbed into the fat. So for bioaccumulation, chemical, it should be what? Stable. Chemicals should be stable, or chemicals metabolites, it should be stable in nature, and apart from that, it should be fat soluble in nature. If it is water soluble, what will happen? It cannot be retained in that particular individual for a longer time. It will be released in the next day itself. So how it will be by accumulation? So by accumulation is what? It should have two properties. One is what? Fat soluble. Other is what? It should be stable in nature. Stable means what? Long lasting in nature. Okay. Now what happens basically when I talk about the bioaccumulation? Bio means what? Bio means cells and tissues, fats, cell tissues and fat. Accumulation means what? If suppose for example methyl mercury, for example what? Methyl mercury. It's a what? Chemical. If it is being released, it can be taken by the feces, a small feces. So ultimately what? From the water itself, from the abiotic environment itself, it has entered into the what? Biotic component. It has been taken by the feces. So that means what? Now those chemical methyl mercury, it is being taken by the feces. उसको क्या कहेंगे हम? Bioaccumulations. ठीक है ना? Now suppose consider 100 feces are there. They have taken 1 gram of methyl mercury. So 100 feces means what? Those 100 feces, if you will see cumulatively, they have been what? 100 grams. 100 grams. Now this is what? Bioaccumulations. A small feces. They are the primary producer. They are what? Primary consumers. For example, we have what? Phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons. They are what? Your primary producers. This primary planktons, they have been eaten by which? A small feces. A small feces. So they are your primary consumers. So when you talk about this bioaccumulation, the chemical that is being released into the water, for example, methyl mercury, they will be taken by the small feces, very small feces. So those small feces, they belong to what? Primary consumers. Now all those small feces, they will be taken by bigger feces, and finally a bigger feces, it will be taken by more bigger feces, and finally it will be taken by humans. So here what? It's the process of what? Biomagnifications. So bioaccumulations happens at what? At the bioaccumulations happen at the same trophic level. But when you talk about the biomagnifications, it moves from one topic level to another topic level. Is it okay? Here you can see. Okay, so suppose here what will happen? In this, what will happen? Plant, suppose bioaccumulation will happen. Bioaccumulation will take place. Bioaccumulation will take place. And if you move from this, there are certain chemicals that can be what? Bioaccumulated into the plants. Those plants, they will be eaten by the herbivorous animals, primary consumers itself. Those herbivorous animals, they will be taken by carnivorous animals. So here, if you take over here, the bioaccumulation will take place. But if you move like this from one topic level to another higher topic level, what will happen? Biomagnification. Biomagnification is what? The concentration of chemicals or toxic element, it will increase. For example, we have discussed 100 small feces, they have consumed, each small feces, they have consumed 1 gram of methyl mercury. Okay, now they are being taken by 10 feces. So each now is 10 feces, they will have 10 gram. And finally all those 10 pieces, they will be taken by a bigger feces. Now those bigger feces, it will have 100 gram. And now those 100 grams of that particular feces, it will be taken by us. ठीक है ना? So this process is called your biomagnification. ठीक है ना? Concentration of toxic elements will what? Will increase on this trophic level. ठीक है? Okay. So I don't know if I convert my PPTs using this software, automatically this thing will happen. In my PPTs, everything is okay. But if it converts, if I'm using AI for the purpose of conversion of my PPTs into the PDF, there are different sites where you can freely convert, but the data, it should be limited up to 15 MB or something like that. If it crosses something like that, you have to use the AI based. If you are using AI based technology, no. Okay, not an issue. The next time I won't be using this block. Okay. So ecological pyramids we have discussed. So remember one thing. The limitations of ecological pyramids. What are the limitations of ecological pyramids? First limitations is what? Maximum we have to consider 4 to 5 trophic level, because after that we do not have the sufficient energy. It has been gone by the 10% rule. Apart from that, the other is what? The trophic level we consider, okay. The trophic levels in the ecological pyramids, they are being governed by what? Food chain. We do not use food web. Food web is not being used. Food chain, simple food chain use किया जाता है. यहाँ देख सकते हैं ecological pyramids do not consider the same species belonging to 2 or more trophic level. It will belong to only one trophic level. The other is what? It assumes a simple food chain which seldom exists, because we know that ultimately what? It's not the food chain, it's what? Food web. It's the actual biotic interactions. Taken up. Moreover, saprophytes, plant, fungus, microorganisms that lives on the decaying matters are not given any place in the ecological pyramid. So these are the limitations. Clear? This is your aquatic food chain. Aquatic food chains. Okay. So this is your what? Primary producers. Primary producers are what? Phytoplanktons and seaweeds. They are your primary producers. They are what? Autotrophs in nature. After that, what? We have what? Primary consumers. This is called your what? Primary consumers. So these phytoplankton, they are eaten by zooplankton. So zooplankton is what? It's a herbivorous consumer. इसको याद रख लीजिएगा, ठीक है ना? The primary producers are what? The primary consumers are what? When you talk about the primary consumers, they depend upon the plant-based food itself. That means what? They are herbivorous in nature. So these phytoplanktons, they will be taken by your zooplanktons. After that, what? This is your primary first level carnivorous. This is the juvenile stages of fishes, juvenile fishes. Then we have second level large fishes. Third level is squid. Fourth we have got dolphin and all those things. Taken. Now pyramids of number. That means what? When you talk about this trophic level, they will answer what? Number. Kitna numbers hai? So pyramids of number. Now example is what? Grassland or pond ecosystem. Suppose this is a grassland. Grassland is what? It's an ecosystem. In the grassland, if you go by the pyramids of number, the pyramids, it will be what? Upright in nature. Because here what we are considering, primary produces is grasses. So obviously the number of grasses is what? Much more higher. So यहाँ पे क्या होगा? When you talk about this particular piece, it talks about the number of grasses. Numbers, obviously. So grasses, after that, what will happen? What will have? Primary consumers, herbivorous, grasshoppers, insects. Next we have what? Carnivorous, frogs and birds, and what? Hawk. So ultimately what? The number is what? Slowly decreasing, and because of that we will have upright. When you talk about like in the pond ecosystem also, pond ecosystem, what will have? Similar, just now I have discussed in the pond ecosystem, what we will having? We will have phytoplanktons. The number of phytoplanktons is obviously what? Much more higher. Then we'll have zooplanktons, small fishes, medium fishes and larger fishes. So there will also what? Upright. But inverted, the number it will what? Number it will what? Inverted. It will increase. For example, a single large tree supporting numerous herbivorous birds and parasites. This is a single large tree. The number is what? 1. Primary consumers, secondary consumers. The number is what? Continuously increasing. So it is what? Inverted in nature. Pyramids of biomass. Okay. That means what? Weight of the biomass. Here we are considering weight of the biomass. So this measures the total dry weight of all organic matter at each level. It is more fundamental than the pyramids of number because it shows the actual masses. For example, upright, most terrestrial ecosystem, it will be what? Upright. Biomass is highest for the producer level and decreases at higher level. Okay. Biomass. But what happens if we talk about the aquatic system? Biomass, here you can see phytoplanktons, weight of the phytoplanktons. After that, what we'll have? Zooplanktons, herbivorous, primary consumers and secondary consumers. Obviously, what? Biomass, it is increasing in this particular sense. So we have the inverted one. Okay. Pyramids of energy. Okay. So pyramids of energy, what we have discussed, it will be always upright in nature, whether we are talking about the terrestrial ecosystem or we are talking about the marine ecosystem, and it is governed by the 10% law of energy transfer. That law is called according to Lindman law. It will always upright in nature. And because of this, using this particular Lindman law, we can consider that when we talk about the energy transfer, and because of this energy transfer, we have hardly 4 to 5 trophic levels. Okay. So we have discussed about the ecosystem. So when you talk about the ecosystem, it's a functional unit of environment. It's the functional element of environment. Functional means what? Because interaction, when you talk about the interaction, when you talk about the interaction, for example, the abiotic component, it interacts with the biotic component. The nutrient, it interacts with the biotic plants. So obviously, how the nutrient will interact? The nutrient, they are going to interact with the help of geochemical cycles, nutrient cycle. For example, we have what? Nitrogen recycling process, sulfur recycling process, phosphorus recycling process. So ultimately, these are what? Abiotic components. These abiotic components, they have to be taken by the plant. They have to be taken by the plant. But once the plant will take it, what will happen? Suppose if we consider this is a particular plot, okay, itself we have the nutrients reservoir over there, the plant will take it. What will happen? But we have discussed the process of what homeostasis. Homeostasis means what? It's the process where the plant, where the ecosystem, it is what? Self-sustaining in nature. That means what? It should be stable in nature. And because of this stability, nutrient recycling is important process. The plant, it has taken it after it. What? The plants, after it will die, it will get converted to dead and decaying matter. Now, those dead and decaying matter, they will be what? They will be taken by the detritivores and finally saprophytes, and those saprotrophs, they will be converting back into the nutrient itself. समझ में आ रहा है ना? Is it okay? So when you talk about the geochemical cycle, it's an important ingredient of your homeostasis process. ठीक है ना? It won't be written over here, but you have to correlate. Why I'm correlating with this? Because of what? Because of climate tipping point, and apart from that, planetary boundaries. I have discussed this is very much important. So any sort of questions, it can be asked. I'm giving you 2 minutes. Just revise what I have discussed. From tomorrow, I think basic fundamentals we have cleared today, completed today, all sort of things. So from tomorrow, we will be talking about the current affair portions directly. Okay, each and every things that is into the current affair, I'll be discussing only those things, and apart from that, it's overlapping historical part, or apart from that, just the basic. Okay, so when you talk about the geochemical cycles, okay, it talks about what nutrients recycling process. For example, what nutrients we have? Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. Okay, these all and water itself, they are all belongs to what nutrient recycling process. So they will be under what gaseous nutrient recycling. Apart from that, sulfur, phosphorus, calcium, they will be under what sedimentary nutrient recycling process. So when you talk about like there's a gaseous is what it's a perfect nutrient recycling process. Why perfect in nature? What is the reason? And this sedimentary recycling is what it is imperfect in nature. समझ में आ रहा है आप लोगों को? For example, carbon, oxygen, carbon, water, nitrogen, all this will be under what? And water, they will be under your gaseous. Gaseous means what? Gases में the recycling process is very much fast in nature. They are not being entrapped, they are not being trapped. Okay, for example, water, well, for example, water. So it will be heated, it will get by the process of what? Evaporation, it will form the cloud again what? It will fall as a raindrop. So this is the example of your gaseous cycle. So what that means what? This is a very fast process. But when you talk about like imperfect cycle, sedimentary cycle, phosphorus, they will be what? Entrapped into the rocks, and after that what will happen? It will take time. Again those rocks, they have to go by the process of weathering, they have to go for the process of erosion, then only they are going to release what? Phosphate. So it's what? Sedimentary cycle. Sedimentary cycle mein kya hoga? They will, those nutrients, they will be taken by the, they will be stored in certain form of rocks itself. So it is imperfect in nature. So here you can see usually perfect replaces lost nutrient quickly, gaseous cycle, and other is what? Imperfect nutrients can go trapped into the deep sediments. Okay, if my question is, when you talk about the carbon dioxide, a carbon nutrient cycle process, if my question is, if I say this carbon nutrient cycle process, a nutrient recycling process is 100% gaseous in nature, am I right? Am I correct? Why? है ना? Just consider the example of your coral reefs. In the coral reefs, what we have? Calcium carbonate is what? Carbon. So obviously what? They are being entrapped. So when you talk about like carbon dioxide or carbon cycle, they somewhat to some extent maximum they are what? Gaseous cycle, but apart from that they are also associated with the sedimentary cycle also. Okay. This is what? Nitrogen. I think we have discussed this thing in detail. For example, atmospheric, let me discuss this. Nitrogen nutrient cycle is very much important. It is very much important. If questions can be asked, it will be always be related to maximum time. It will be related to what? Nitrogen recycle. See, when you talk about the nitrogen, let me discuss nitrogen. This is what nitrogen. This is what elemental nitrogen present in the atmosphere. Elemental nitrogen. We have discussed that when you talk about elemental nitrogen, this is what three covalent bonds are there, and because of that, it is very difficult to dissociate it. It is very difficult to what? Break those nitrogen bonds. Okay, and because of this, it cannot be directly used by the plant. Because plant, they require what? Plant, they acquire this nitrogen in the process of what? Nitrate in the process of nitrate and ammonium form. Okay, is it okay? This is the form. So plant, they cannot take this particular elemental nitrogen. So ultimately what? It has to be broken down. It has to be this particular elemental nitrogen that is being connected with the triple covalent bond, they have to be broken down. Now how it will break? It will be broken with the help of nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation process. That means what? Leguminous bacteria. Okay, for example, when you talk about the leguminous plants, they have what? Rhizobium bacteria. Those rhizobium bacteria, they are responsible for conversion of this elemental nitrogen into what? Ammonia. So this, it will get converted into ammonia. Okay, first thing. Second is what? Second process is what? Even lightning also. Lightning, thunders, they will convert this. Okay, so this nitrogen bond, they can be broken with the help of lightning and thunders also. Okay, ठीक है. So the process is what? This atmospheric nitrogen, they will be what? They will be converted into ammonia with the help of nitrogen fixation bacteria living in the legume, for example, rhizobium bacteria. Now this is being converted into what? Ammonia. Okay. Now this particular ammonia, it will get converted into what? Ammonium ion. Now this ammonium ion, it will undergo the process of what? Nitrification. That means what? It will get converted into nitrites, and this will be carrying out by a process called nitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying, what is the name of the nitrifying bacteria? Nitrosomonas and Nitrococcus. Okay, these are what? Nitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying means what? They will convert the ammonia into your nitrites, and finally this nitrites, they will be getting converted into your nitrate. It will be with the help of nitrobacter. Okay, and this nitrite, it will be taken by the plant. This nitrate, it will be taken by the plant. Apart from this ammonia, it will also be taken by the plant. But plant mostly prefer what? Okay. Clear? There is a process called assimilation. What is assimilation? Assimilation is the process when the elemental nitrogen, it is converted with the help of nitrifying bacteria, with the help of your nitrogen fixation bacteria, okay, into an ammonium ion. With the help of nitrifying bacteria, produces what? Nitrite and nitrate. So plant take this, plant what? Absorb either ammonia, either nitrite, or either nitrate with the help of what? Xylem vascular tissues, and it is being utilized in the process of what? Photosynthesis. So this process is called what? It is called your assimilation. Clear? So don't worry, it's there in your notes. Okay. This is very much important. That is why everything it is there. For example, we have discussed nitrogen fixation. So nitrogen, elemental nitrogen to convert to ammonia or ammonium ion. Okay, ammonium ion with the help of what? Symbiotic bacteria. Example, you got rhizobium bacteria in legumes, Anapena bacteria in azolla, free living azotobacter, Clostridium and Nostoc bacteria. Okay, they convert unreactive atmospheric nitrogen into biologically available form. Includes lightning and Haber process also. Lightning process we have discussed. We have what? Either the nitrogen fixation bacteria, they convert elemental nitrogen into ammonia, or we have what? Lightning process. Apart from that, this ammonia, it is also being manufactured in the company. It is also being manufactured by a process called Haber process. Okay, ठीक है. Ammonifications Organic ammonifications, organic nitrogens, they will convert into ammonia. Putrefying bacteria and the fungi decomposer convert the dead organic matter back to the inorganic ammonia, ensuring nitrogen is not trapped into the carcasses. Okay, they are the responsibility of your decomposers. For example, we have discussed it is being carried out by the two process, dativorous and saprotrophs. They will release the entrapped nitrogen content into the dead decaying matters. Again is what? Nitrification. So nitrification means what? Okay, nitrification, it is being carried out by ammonia. It will get converted into what? Nitrite. Please check it. Nitrite we have discussed, and apart from that, it will get converted into your nitrate. So first step, it will be carried by the process of nitrosomonas bacteria, and second step, from nitrite to nitrate, it will be converted into nitrobacteria. Okay. Assimilations, either nitrite, nitrate, or NH4. It will be taken by the plants via roots. That means what? Capillarity action. Okay, the only biological build-up phase where the nitrogen becomes part of DNA, RNA, protein. So in this particular process, what will happen? It is responsible for developing the DNA, RNA, and the proteins. Okay. Denitrification. Denitrification means what? The nitrogen, it has to be what? Converted into the elemental nitrogen. Elemental nitrogen itself. So this nitrate, nitrate, it will be getting converted into your elemental nitrogen. These are the bacteria. What is the name of the bacteria? Pseudomonas, Thiobacillus, denitrificans, and Paracocomus. So these two names are important. Remember one thing. Which particular bacteria? They are the anaerobic bacteria. Okay, occurs in anaerobic waterlogged soils. Complete the cycle by returning nitrogen to the atmosphere. Okay, so this the nitrate, it will be converted into an elemental nitrogen by the bacteria called Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus, but they operate using your anaerobic conditions. That means what? Devoid of oxygen. For example, marshland. Okay, so there what will happen? They convert the nitrate into your elemental nitrogen. ठीक है ना? जहां पे भी आपका anaerobic conditions रहता है, waterlogged conditions रहते हैं. ठीक है? Okay, solve this question. C. Which of the following adds nitrogen to the soil? Excretion of urea by the animals. ठीक है ना? Because okay, death of the vegetation, we have discussed death of the vegetation. They release what? Dead decaying organic matters. They are being fed by the detrivorous saprophytes, and finally they will get converted into your ammonia. ठीक है ना? Burning of coal by men, what will happen? Huh? Yes, it releases into the atmosphere. Okay, good. Okay. Which can be the impact of excessive inappropriate use of nitrogenous fertilizers in agriculture? If you are excessively using what? Nitrogenous fertilizer. For example, urea. Okay. Okay, this is your. ठीक है. Proliferation of nitrogen fixes microorganisms in soil. Increase in the acidity of soil can take place. ठीक है. Leaching of nitrate to the groundwater can occur. Proliferation of nitrogen fixing microorganism in soil can occur. Why not? For okay, then symbiotic relationship. Yes, huh?
I am for increases nitrogen. Sorry.
ठीक है. Now we have discussed that these nitrogen fixations microorganisms they are found in the leguminous plants and they are responsible for conversion of your elemental nitrogen to the ammonia itself. But when you go for the excessive use of this particular urea itself, so urea, when you talk about the urea, they do not require nitrogen fixations bacteria. I have discussed the urea, they will convert this CONH2 to into your urea by with the help of an enzyme that is secreted by the microorganisms, and that particular enzyme is called urease enzyme, है ना? So urease enzyme into your ammonia itself. So in this particular process, there is no requirement of nitrogen fixation bacteria. Obviously, if there is no requirement, what will happen? Slowly and gradually, the population will decrease. Okay, and there is an other aspect also. The other aspect is what? The ratio of carbon to nitrogen. The ratio of carbon to nitrogen. Generally, we have to maintain. Generally, if you go like the general requirement is the carbon to oxygen requirement is your 8:1. 8:1. Okay, but if you are excessively adding the nitrogen, what will happen? This ratio, it will what? Because since excessive nitrogens are being added, and because of this, it will lead to the depletion of organic carbon. Organic carbon will decrease, and if the organic carbon will decrease, it is going to deplete the population of this nitrogen fixations here. ठीक है ना? So affects carbon is to nitrogen ratio. Nitrogen इसमें क्या होगा? Carbon is to nitrogen ratio, it will what? Increase, and because of this organic carbon content, organic carbon, it will what? Decrease, and इसके कारण से क्या होगा आपका? Okay, so this statement is wrong. Increase in the acidity of the soil can take place. Why? How you can correlate? Increase in the acidity, if we are, suppose we have discussed that when we are using this conventional urea, only they are 30 to 35% effective. 30 to 35%, it is what? Effective in nature. Is it okay? Clear? So it get converted into your this CONH2, it is get converted into your ammonia NH3. Now when we are using this urea, ultimately what? Very fastly it will get converted into ammonia, and from this ammonia it will get converted into your nitrite. This nitrate, it is volatile in nature. If it is not being used by the plant, what will happen? It will escape into the atmosphere itself. Now this nitrate, it will react with what? Water molecules, and will form what? It will form nitric acid. So ultimately what? Increase in the acidity of the soil can take place. Can likha hua na? It is what? Can take place. That means what we are talking about, the acidic rain. I think I have discussed when taking the classes of science and tech, but they have discussed the possibility of nitrate volatilizations, and there, because of this, the government has introduced the concept of neem coated urea, है ना? ठीक है? Leaching of nitrate to the groundwater can occur, definitely. इसका क्या है? Possibility that it can escape into the atmosphere, and strong possibility of what? Leaching also. ठीक है ना? So the answer is what? 2 and 3. Okay. Now, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Can anybody explain this particular process? Carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's a recycling process. Newton recycling. For example, a quite simple example, when you talk about like photosynthesis process, the one of the integral component of photosynthesis is what? Absorption of carbon dioxide by the stomata. It is being absorbed, and that particular carbon dioxide under dark reaction, it is being converted into what? A starch, C6H12O6. Okay, and it is being stored into the plant itself. Okay, when the plant, suppose a plant is being fully developed, plant, okay, it's a type of, we are burning the fuel. Plants, logs, just say plants, trees, logs, they are used as a fuel for the purpose of burning it. When you burn it, what is going to release? It's going to release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So this is what one of the example of nutrient recycling process. Okay, and I have discussed when you talk about that carbon dioxide, it undergoes what both gaseous cycle as well as the sedimentary cycle itself. For example, geography has been completed, you must be knowing about the geosynclines. What is geosynclines? Geosynclines जो होते हैं, you go through it. Okay, you go through it, you just go through it. For example, if you talk about the India coal formation, it is correlated to which type of geological time period? Carboniferous time period. If you go through the geological time period, we have different time period. When you talk about the India में जो coal formation, when you talk about India coal formation, it is what? Synchronizing with the carboniferous period. So coal formation means what? Geosynclines are there. Now those geosynclines, what? It will getting converted slowly and gradually forest, and those forests, they will be what? Covered with the soil, and finally it is going to form the coal. It is going to form the coal. Just correlate. Geosynclines, water, and slowly and gradually forest. Now when you talk about the forest, it contains what? Carbon dioxide. In the forest, what we have inside? Carbon dioxide, and finally those carbon dioxide, they are being entrapped, and slowly and gradually they will be within millions of years, they will be forming what? Coals. Coals means what? The different coals are what? Lignite, peat, lignite, bituminous, peat, lignite, subbituminous, bituminous, and anthracite. When you talk about the anthracite coal, it is the best form of the coal. So again, we will burn that particular coal. What will happen? The coal, it will release into the atmosphere. This is the example of your carbon cycle. Okay. And apart from that, we have discussed when you talk about like leaves. The leaves, they have this particular component, starch component, C6H12O6. Those leaves, when they will become, when they become the dead and decaying one, they will be destroyed. They will be what? Detrivorous, and finally what? Saprotrophs, and finally what? They are going to release the organic content back into the soil. So these are the three mechanisms. Okay, so we have discussed the biological sort cycle. We have discussed photosynthesis process, respirations process, decomposition process. We have discussed respiration. Okay. Plants and animals break down carbohydrates of energy, releasing carbon dioxide. We have, okay. Plants, just now we have discussed the process of respiration. Each individual component of the plant, they undergo the process of respiration. Geological long-term cycle, sedimentary cycle. Weathering, rainwater reacts with the atmosphere carbon dioxide to form weak carbonic acid. This dissolves rocks, releasing calcium bicarbonates ion into the ocean, and they are being stored over there. Sedimentation in the ocean, these ions are used by the marine organisms like corals, planktons to make calcium carbonate cells. When they die, they sink, eventually what? Forming limestone. When you talk about this coral reefs are nothing but the reefs that is being formed by the calcium carbonate itself. So there what? The carbon dioxide is being entrapped. ठीक है ना? Subduction, tectonic plate movement carries carbonate rocks into the earth mantle, where they melt, releases carbon dioxide through volcanic eruptions. So volcanic eruption से क्या? Carbon dioxide भी release होता है. The most important is what? Sulfur dioxide gas. देखिए क्वेश्चन जो आएंगे आपके, it will be from, okay. Sulfur. Remember one thing, plant absorbs sulfur in the form of sulfate ions. Okay. So sulfur reservoir is in the soil and sediments where it is logged in organic coal, oil, and pits, and inorganic deposit pyrite rocks, sulfur rocks in the form of sulfate, sulfides, and organic sulfur. It is released by the weathering of rock, erosional runoffs, and decomposition of organic matter is carried to the terrestrial aquatic ecosystem in salt solution. The sulfur cycle is mostly what? Sedimentary. Mostly what? It is sedimentary, except the two of its compound, hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is what? It's a gas. It's a what? Gas. So obviously it will be relating to the gaseous cycle, and apart from that, sulfur dioxide, which add a gaseous component. Sulfur enters the atmosphere from several sources like volcanic eruptions, combustion of fossil fuels, and form the surface of the ocean, and gases released by the decomposition. Atmospheric hydrogen sulfide also get oxidized into sulfur dioxide. whatever the source, the sulfur in the form of sulfate is taken by the plant. Just remember. Okay, sulfate ions. Okay, incorporated through a series of metabolic process into the sulfur bearing amino acid, which is incorporated into the protein of autotroph tissues. So this sulfur, they are also responsible for the development of sulfur bearing amino acids, and when you talk about this particular amino acid, they are also responsible for the development of. Clear? This is methane cycle. What is methane? Significance of it. Global warming potential. Okay. Or any other thing? One questions, it will be coming from the methane itself. When we are discussing about the COP, okay, methane plays and all those things, there we will be discussing. ठीक है ना? So, because of this methane phase, they becomes very important. So production, that is called methanogenesis. The cycle begins in anaerobic oxygen-free environment. ठीक है ना? Specialized microorganisms called methanogens, which belong to the domain archaea, break down the organic matter. Methanogens. What are methanogens? You must be knowing that when you talk about like animals, okay, like cow, buffaloes, okay, in their gut, gut means what? Gastrointestinal tract, a small intestine, they have this methanogens bacteria. They have those methanogens bacteria. They are responsible for the purpose of what? Digestion, and they release what? Methane gases. They release what? Methane gases. Clear? So जो भी cow होते हैं, buffalo होते हैं, they release methane gases. It's because of the methanogens bacteria that is residing in their gut. ठीक है? And this methanogens bacteria, they require what? Anaerobic conditions. That means what? Devoid of oxygen. ठीक है? Second is your chemical trigger. In the absence of oxygen, this archaea uses carbon dioxide or acetate as an electron acceptor, release methane as byproduct. Primary settings: natural wetlands, swamps, marshes, termites, digestive tract of ruminants, cattle. Anthropogenic for flood, rice paddies, landfills, sewage treatment plants. So when you talk about the rice fields, so when you talk about the rice field that seems to be submerged into the water, that is acting as a what? Wetland. That also acts as a what? Wetland. So when you talk about the rice field, it is in waterlogged, so it is providing a condition of what? Anaerobic conditions. So in that particular anaerobic conditions, what will happen? Methane gas it will be produced. ठीक है ना? जहाँ भी where you feel that organic matter is there, where you feel that organic matter is there, and that particular organic matter, it is being submerged, it is being waterlogged condition, there will be methanogenous bacteria, they will become very much active, and those methanogenous bacteria, they will release what? Methane gases. ठीक है ना? Now biological filters, methanotropy. Before methane can escape into the atmosphere, that is being released, it often has to pass through the oxygen rich zones. The consumption gate, as methane rises from the deep oxygen free mud of the upper aerated layer of the soil or water, it encounters methanotropes, methane eating bacteria. These bacteria oxidize methane back into the carbon dioxide. For example, the methane that is being released from the wetland, that is being released from the waterlogged rice condition, that is being released by the process of what? By ruminants, okay. Those, they are being trapped by this particular bacteria, methane eating bacteria, and those methane eating bacteria, they convert methane back into the carbon dioxide. It acts as a buffer. If the soil is healthy and aerated, less methane reaches to the atmosphere. If the soil is continuously flooded, like the traditional, like this filter fails and methane escapes increases. Now, can we correlate? So this is forming a cycle, and this is what? An example of homeostasis process also. Is it? Can you correlate? This particular process is also an example of homeostasis. For example, if the condition is aerated, it will release what? Carbon dioxide. But if the condition is what? Anaerobic conditions, what will release? Methane gas it will release. Now this methane gas, they will be taken by this methane bacteria to get converted back into the carbon dioxide. atmospheric residence and transport. Once methane escapes the soil filter, it enters the troposphere. ठीक है ना? Now see, methane either it will be reaching the tropospheric region, or it will get converted into what? Carbon dioxide. If it reaches into the troposphere, then it will be acting as a what? Greenhouse gas. ठीक है ना? So unlike carbon dioxide which stays for centuries, methane has a short lifespan of how much? 10 to 12 years. But when you talk about like global warming potential is much more higher compared to the carbon dioxide. Global warming potential means what? What is global warming potential? Potential to what? Trap the heat. Potential to what? Which type of radiations it captures? Which type of radiations? Is it okay? For example, we have water molecules, we have carbon dioxide, we have methane also, but the incoming solar radiations are what? Short wave solar radiations. Now the solar radiations, they will be absorbed by the earth's surface. In the night they releases what? Long wave terrestrial radiation. This long wave terrestrial radiation, they are being captured by the carbon dioxide, and this is the example of greenhouse. And because of this particular greenhouse gases, the life become what? Sustainable in this on the earth. Otherwise the temperature of the earth, it could be within minus 18 or minus 20 degrees Celsius. It's because of that. But what is happening? The concentration of greenhouse gases is continuously increasing. For example, carbon dioxide, the concentration has been increased to drastic limit, and because of that, temperature, it is continuously increasing. Okay? The final thing, atmosphere oxidation. The cycle closes when the methane is chemically destroyed in the air. It is by the hydroxyl group. The atmospheric detergent, the primary sink for methane is what? Hydroxyl radical OH group. The reaction, when methane reacts with the hydroxyl group, it releases CH3 along with the water. Though OH3 is a further reaction, the carbon atom eventually returns to its most oxidized state, carbon dioxide. We have seen ultimately the methane. So what we have seen when we talk about like waterlogged conditions, for example, ruminants, they releases methane. When you talk about like waterlogged conditions, the anaerobic bacteria, methanogens, they will be converting what? The digestion C6H12O6 starts back into the methane itself. The process of digestion, the methane that is being released, it has two paths. Either it will be captured by the methanotrophs, bacteria, and they will convert this back into the carbon dioxide itself, or it will escape into the troposphere. If it escapes into the troposphere, that particular becomes your greenhouse gas. Okay. Now, apart from that, if it is not being tapped, what will happen? That particular methane, it will be what? Captured by the hydroxyl group, and this hydroxyl group, it will be responsible for converting the methane back into the carbon dioxide. This is your phosphorus cycle. This is not so important. Phosphorus cycle is what? It's also a sedimentary cycle, and apart from that, plant absorbs phosphorus in the form of phosphate. Okay, phosphate ion. Just go through it. This is not so important. Okay. Solve this question. Which of the following are nitrogen fixing plants? Alfalfa, amaranth, chickpea, clover, purslane, spinach. Which one? A. For example, here you can see this is what? This is not a leguminous plant. So from this, okay. With reference to the agricultural soil, consider the following statement: a high content of organic matter in soil drastically reduces water holding capacity. Soil does not play any role in the sulfur cycle. Irrigations over a period of time can contribute to the salinization of some agricultural lands. For example, we have discussed about the organic matter. If the presence of organic matter is high, okay, they have a stronger water holding capacity. Okay, and organic capacity kafi, water holding capacity, it will be very good. So this statement is what? Wrong. Just we have discussed that the soil, they are entrapped into the, and sulfur, they are entrapped into the soil. This statement is also sulfur. Irrigations, this is also what? Only 3. Excessive use of chemical fertilizers in the Indo-Gangetic plains led to the dead zones in the Bay of Bengal. Even these dead zones, they are being created in the where? Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico में भी dead zones are being created because when you talk about the America, they use excessive fertilizers, and because of that, those fertilizers they're responsible for creating dead zones. So, क्या होगा आंसर? A. B, na? Is it okay? See what happens basically whenever we are using agricultural fertilizers, we have discussed the efficiency, the effectiveness of agricultural fertilizers. It is what very less, 30 to 35% they will be absorbed by the plant. Now rest of the fertilizers they will be what? Through runoff, they will be going to the nearby pond. In the nearby pond, what will happen? Nutrient enrichment will take place, and because of this nutrient enrichment, those nitrogens it will be taken by the algae phytoplanktons. Okay, and because of that, what will happen? The complete pond it will be covered with the algae, and this becomes the algal bloom. Okay, next is your what? And slowly and gradually, what will happen? Slowly and gradually, this pond it will be completely filled with what? Algae. That's the algal bloom, and because of this, the light when you talk the light, it won't be reaching to the surfaces, bottom surfaces, and because of that, the different species of fishes, the different microorganisms that is residing inside the water, what will happen? They will die. They will die. Now, for the purpose of degrading those fishes, what we require? Oxygen it is being required. Bacteria, they will be requiring those oxygen for the purpose of degrading it. So slowly and gradually, what will happen? The bacteria, it will what? Start destroying those organic matter, and because of that, the oxygen concentration it will be what? Decrease. That means what? It will have low. It will have increased biological oxygen demand. Increased biological oxygen demand means what? More oxygen it is being required for the purpose of consuming, for the purpose of degrading those fishes that are what? Dying in that particular pond itself. And slowly and gradually, what will happen? The oxygen it will what? Drop, and this condition is called hypoxia. ठीक है ना? In the context of sustainable agriculture and soil health का discipline, consider the statement regarding nitrogen recycling. Okay, क्या होगा आंसर? See, leguminous plants we have discussed. Crops introduce nitrogen into the cycle via symbiotic relations with rhizobacterium bacteria which convert atmosphere. This is true. We have discussed. Continuous applications of chemical urea lead to soil acidification. Just we have discussed, which can eventually suppress the natural nitrogen fixation capacity of the soil microbes. That we have discussed. Third is what? The use of neem-coated urea is designed to speed up the process of nitrification. Nitrification means what? The conversion of into NH3. Okay, but we have discussed what if it is not being taken properly, it gets converted into what? Nitrate or nitrate. Okay, and that has to be taken by the plant. Otherwise, what will happen? This nitrate that is being formed, it is highly volatile in nature. It can escape into the atmosphere. Leaching will take place, and because of that, what we have introduced neem-coated urea. So it will designed to speed up the process to reduce. Which one much faster? 1 and 2. Okay. So we have completed the basic fundamentals. From tomorrow onwards, we will be what? Discussing all sort of current affair, most important current affair coupled with a static part itself. So is it okay? And we'll practice few questions. So with this, thank you. Thanks for time.